This meeting has begun. I want to say a thank you to all of you for joining us this morning. Welcome to the Full Appropriations Committee Member Day hearing. And before we get started, I want to note that due to the number of members who are participating, that's about 35, very, very exciting, and it demonstrates the centrality of the appropriations process. But given the numbers that we have, we will not be asking questions so that we can be able to hear everyone and be able to listen to testimony and take into consideration the requests. I cannot stress enough the importance of input from our colleagues on and off the committee in shaping the appropriations bills. The Constitution vests the Congress with the power of the purse, and the Appropriations Committee exercises that power through our 12 annual appropriations bills. But every member, no matter their party or their seniority, has a role in ensuring government funding meets the needs of their districts. In addition to the funding requests we receive every year, this year, the Appropriations Committee is accepting community project funding requests, allowing members to submit proposals to fund a small universe of worthy projects with strong demonstrations of community support. I am pleased to report that 331 members have already submitted over 3,000 community project funding requests. The Appropriations Committee has also received over 73,000 programmatic and language requests. As we speak, the committee is carefully examining all of these requests, and members will continue to have opportunities to work on appropriations bills as we move through subcommittee and full committee markups and the floor amendment process. Today, as we provide yet another opportunity for you to make your pitches to the committee, I look forward to listening and to learning. I encourage you to be forthright. Please tell us what your communities need. I appreciate your attendance and thank you for your participation, and looking forward to a robust dialogue as we work through these requests together. As members of Congress, we are entrusted with the responsibility to speak up on behalf of our constituents. We owe it to them and to the American people to ensure no voice goes unheard. And with that, I would like to recognize the ranking member of the Appropriations Committee, Congresswoman Granger, for her opening statement.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for hosting this hearing today. It's very important, as you said, that we hear from members about their priorities before we start marking up appropriations bill. You've got a great response here. We're going to have a lot to do in a very short amount of time. We're going to mark up and take bills to the floor before August. In order to do this, we'll need to work out all the issues that we can in advance. Today's hearing is a very important step in that process, and I want to thank the members who are testifying today for their time and their input. I thank you, Madam Chair, and I yield back.
We are, at the moment, if you will bear with us, we are waiting for our first two witnesses to join with us. Okay, so we are going to go out of turn, though, and we're going to let me recognize Congressman Auchincloss from Massachusetts. Congressman Auchincloss, you're recognized for 5 minutes. Congressman Auchincloss, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and Ranking Member Cole. I'm here today to urge you to fully fund throughout the district work period to visit these sites and communities And I'm grateful to the committee for the opportunity to personally express how enthusiastic our state and local leaders are about supporting these projects to address the critical needs of my constituents. As the country recovers from this pandemic, we must address the persistent shortcomings of our current infrastructure. It is critical that our recovery ensures people have access to life's fundamentals so that they can thrive in the present and be prepared for the future. These projects are investments in both. For the present, clean drinking water, healthcare, and social services. For the future, disaster preparedness and economic development. I'll begin by outlining 4 water infrastructure projects that have emerged as priorities. I'll begin by outlining 4. Excuse me, Madam Chairwoman, I'm having an issue here. Excuse me one second, I lost the remarks. I'd like to outline 4 water infrastructure projects that have emerged as priorities. I apologize, can I be moved further down the line? My remarks have disappeared on me. I apologize for that.
Okay, all right, we'll try to accommodate you. Thank you very, very much. Let me just check to see whether or not either Congressman Kilmer or Congressman Timmons are ready with their testimony. Okay,
Chairwoman, I can proceed now, Chairwoman. I really apologize for that. My iPad is fritzing on me.
Not to worry, just proceed.
I'll begin by outlining 4 water infrastructure projects that have emerged as priorities for my constituents. One town in my district, Medway, is currently unable to pump sufficient water for peak demand. The town is at risk of not having enough water during emergencies, and the $2.75 million I have requested will support the town's plan to develop a centralized water treatment facility to ensure residents have reliable drinking water. Similarly, the town of Plainville's existing water system is over capacity, and the appropriation of $1.5 million would expand its water treatment plant to twice its current capacity. In the town of Norton, its water system is currently running at almost half capacity. The requested $1.475 million would replace 3 wells that serve almost 20,000 people and increase capacity by approximately 1 million gallons per day. Finally, my constituents in Hopedale are experiencing frequent water restrictions because the town's storage capacity has reached unsafe levels. Community project funding would support designing and constructing a new storage tank. We know that health is more than just access to clean water. We have witnessed firsthand how critical community health centers are to ensuring that all people, regardless of income or insurance status, have access to the health care they need. Manic Community Health Center will be able to use the requested $500,000 to develop a satellite facility and deliver equitable and comprehensive health care in the heart of Attleboro's downtown. In addition, Attleboro's New Hope Domestic Violence Shelter's request for $2 million would support the construction of a new shelter and provide refuge to the hundreds of survivors seeking refuge every day in Massachusetts who are unable to access space due to lack of capacity. The new shelter will help survivors recover from mental health disease and substance use. To ensure these basic resources are available around the clock, we must proactively protect our infrastructure through disaster mitigation. The requested $1.5 million from North Attleboro would dredge the 10-mile river. In Somerset, the $1 million in pre-disaster mitigation project funding would repair and reinforce the Somerset Dam. By protecting basic necessities, we can look to the future and what investments will ensure our communities continue to grow. Bristol Community College's request for $2 million for its National Offshore Wind Institute would prepare a workforce that supports green energy and good-paying jobs. The Institute can turn a climate crisis into an opportunity to create jobs while protecting the planet for the next generation. Offshore wind can do for the South Coast what life sciences did for Cambridge and Boston 20 years ago, become an engine of economic development and innovation. Also on the South Coast, the requested $1 million Economic Development Initiative funding would provide a pivotal boost to Fall River's waterfront as an environmentally friendly place to work, visit, and recreate. These priorities represent the input of local, regional, and state officials, town administrators and mayors, state reps and state senators, regional planning bodies, and the governor and cabinet. We have also consulted a diverse set of experts from relevant sectors, including transportation, housing, economic development, renewable energy, and the life sciences. It is my belief that these investments will go far beyond benefiting only the 4th District of Massachusetts. We have long been a leader in my home state in the life sciences, technology, and education. And I'm proud to support projects that are going to further the Commonwealth's standing as a powerhouse of talent, work ethic, and innovation for the generation to come. I appreciate your time, Madam Chairwoman, and again, I apologize for the technological issue.
No apologies. I want to thank the gentleman for his testimony and for the thoughtfulness of the projects that have been initiated. So with that, as I mentioned earlier, because we have really 35 members, we are not going to be asking questions. That doesn't diminish our consideration of your efforts and your projects. So thank you very much. And with that, if I can, I'd want to recognize Congressman Derek Kilmer from Washington State. Congressman Kilmer, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to you and the ranking member for hosting today's Member Day hearing. Ensuring that the House is equipped to uphold its Article 1 responsibilities is important, and it's challenging work, and I thank you for your leadership. I'm here today actually not to talk about my service on the Appropriations Committee, but to talk about the work of the Select Committee on the Modernization of Congress, which I chair alongside Vice Chair William Timmons. The Select Committee's guiding principle is to make Congress work better for the American people. This simple but profound goal guides all of our work, and it helps us identify institutional problems and develop hopefully helpful solutions. During the 116th Congress, the Select Committee unanimously passed almost 100 recommendations to improve the way Congress works. About a third of those recommendations were included in legislation that passed the House last March. Today, Vice Chair Timmons and I want to highlight just some of the Select Committee's recommendations that we think deserve funding. Investing in these recommendations would improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the legislative branch so that we can better serve the American people. The Select Committee has and will continue to focus on building staff capacity. That means figuring out what Congress needs to do to attract and hold on to a diverse and talented workforce. The committee held 4 hearings on these issues in the 116th Congress and kicked off the 117th with a series of 3 hearings devoted to staff recruitment, retention, and diversity. We also recently held a hearing on accessibility in Congress, which featured a perspective on the challenges staff with disabilities face while working on the Hill. We know that staff deserve better benefits, more training opportunities, and a healthy work-life balance. We also know that offering competitive salaries is essentially the only way to prevent staff from leaving Capitol Hill for private sector or executive branch jobs. This ongoing brain drain leaves Congress relying on lobbyists for policy expertise, and that's not the system the framers intended. One important way to address these issues is to address the vehicle by which members pay staff, the Member Representational Allowance, or MRA. The Select Committee recommended report language directing a thorough and updated evaluation of the MRA formula, including a consideration of staff pay that provides a modernized and data-driven means of determining the MRA. Paying our staff more is a priority. At the same time, Congress needs to provide staff with the skills and training that they need to excel at their jobs that they were hired to do. And to this end, the Select Committee suggests funding or support for the CAO to provide institution-wide standard onboarding training for new employees, including required training to ensure all new staff understand their role, how Congress operates, as well as logistics like benefits. Staff are key to this institution's success, and investing in their training helps Congress work better for the American people. These are some of the examples of important steps Congress can take to begin the long overdue process of investing in the amazing staff who help us carry out our representational and legislative responsibilities. These requests are also consistent with additional efforts underway in the House to increase staff pay and benefits. I'd like to mention one final recommendation. The Select Committee also suggested funding or support for the CAO to create a pilot Congressional Leadership Academy for members. If members believe that additional professional development and institutional training will help them better carry out their representational and legislative responsibilities, they should have access to programs that will help them continue learning so that they can do their jobs smarter. Congress is actually the first place that I've worked that hasn't really had those sorts of professional development opportunities. And I think that's a worthy investment by the institution so that members can better serve their constituents. Making Congress work better for the American people is a worthwhile investment. On behalf of the Select Committee on Modernization, I appreciate your consideration of these requests, and I'm happy to provide additional information to support your work. So thank you for the opportunity to speak before the committee today. I yield back.
Thank you, Congressman Kilmer, and just want to briefly say that we're grateful for the work that the Bipartisan Committee on Modernization completed, as it has helped us in putting into place the process for community projects funding. So thank you for your good work. And with that, let me recognize Congressman Timmons from South Carolina.
Chair DeLauro and Ranking Member Granger, thank you for hosting today's Member Day hearing, and thank you for your leadership on this important committee. I'm here today to talk about some of the recommendations the Select Committee on the Modernization of Congress has made to make Congress a more effective and efficient institution. I serve as Vice Chair of the Select Committee alongside Chairman Kilmer. We work as partners to identify problems and develop solutions to make Congress work better for the American people. I'm proud of what the Select Committee accomplished in the 116th Congress. We proved that it is possible for members from both sides of the aisle to sit down together, engage in tough discussions, listen and learn from one another, and ultimately find bipartisan solutions to the challenges that we all face. The committee unanimously passed 97 recommendations to improve the way Congress works and turned many of these recommendations into legislation that passed the House last year. Today, I want to join Chair Kilmer in highlighting some of the Select Committee's recommendations that we think should be funded. A modern Congress is one that is well equipped to serve the American people, and we think that is worthy of investment. In addition to the important staffing-related recommendations that Chair Kilmer has just addressed, I want to highlight a few recommendations designed to make Congress a more collaborative and efficient institution, and members better able to serve their constituents. Select Committee members believe that Congress is stronger when members find ways to work together to solve problems. Relationship building is key to successful collaboration, and the more opportunities members have to get to know one another, the better. In this spirit, the Select Committee requests funding for the Committee on House Administration to institute biennial bipartisan retreats for members at the start of each Congress. This would help promote productive engagement across the aisle and ultimately encourage better policymaking. Productivity could also be increased by better balancing our time between home and DC and better managing our often hectic and unpredictable schedules. The speaker has made a number of changes to the schedule, and I believe that in years to come, we will be able to further hone the best schedule we can possibly have for future Congresses. Another important recommendation was to create a bipartisan members-only space in the Capitol to encourage more collaboration and relationship building across party lines. This space should be full service to be very inviting and could hopefully have an indoor and outdoor option for days when the weather is nice. During the 116th Congress, the Select Committee devoted a lot of time to exploring ways to improve the House schedule and calendar, and we will continue to do so in the 117th. We know there's no perfect calendar and no schedule that will please every member. Everyone's situation is different, and our preferred schedules to some degree reflect those differences. That said, there are still ways we can make more efficient use of our time. One of the biggest challenges we heard about from colleagues was managing competing committee schedules. For this reason, the Select Committee recommends including funding or support for the clerk to establish a common committee calendar on docs.house.gov that identifies member committee conflicts in real time at the time a committee meeting is published. By identifying and collecting data on committee conflicts, we can begin to develop solutions toward creating more efficient and productive committee schedules. The other recommendations I would like to address today focus on helping members and staff work smarter and better on behalf of the American people. The Select Committee recommends funding or supporting for the CAO to support member offices with their casework business processes. This includes providing electronic document management, accessibility, and the creation of constituent forms that can be viewed, edited, and electronically signed. By building these kind of efficiencies into our systems, we can better work for our constituents. That is what we are here to do. The Select Committee also requests funding to remove constituent communication costs from the MRA and create a shared account for members' communications. As Chair Kilmer noted, increasing staff salaries is a priority. This recommendation will help free up additional funds that members could use to pay staff more. These recommendations, in addition to those addressed by Chair Kilmer, will make Congress work better for the American people, and I believe that is an investment worth making. I appreciate your consideration of these requests, and I'm happy to provide additional information to support your work. Again, thank you for the opportunity to speak before the committee today. And with that, I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. And again, to both you and to Chair Kilmer, thank you for the work that's being done by the Modernization Committee and the laudable goals that you have for making Congress work better and more efficiently, and also dealing with the issues of quality of life for members and for the ability to communicate across party lines as well. So grateful for the work of this committee. And with that, if I can, I would like to introduce and for testimony, Congressman Frank Mervan from Indiana. Congressman Mervan, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I would first like to thank Chair DeLaura and Ranking Member Granger for holding today's Member Day hearing. I also want to congratulate the full committee, including the chair and ranking member of each subcommittee, for soliciting and considering member requests for community project funding as a part of our fiscal year 2022 appropriations process. As you are well aware, our Constitution states clearly, no money shall be drawn from the Treasury, but in consequence of appropriations made by law. And I am pleased this committee has taken steps to reaffirm the legislative branch's power of the purse, as well as given the members the opportunity to direct federal spending to worthy, locally supported projects. I also appreciate the stringent transparency measures instituted by the committee. We must always be reminded of our fiduciary responsibilities to hardworking taxpayers. As a public servant, we must conduct appropriate oversight to ensure the American people that each and every appropriated dollar is fulfilling an essential need in benefiting our communities. I have the great honor and privilege of representing Indiana's 1st Congressional District. Following in the footsteps of my mentor and friend, Chairman Pete Visklowski, our 1st District is at the center of vital road, rail, air, and port networks and home to major manufacturing industries. This infrastructure, coupled with our incredible workforce in adjacency to the great city of Chicago, enables our region to continue to attract new businesses and talent. Northwest Indiana is proud to have the largest concentration of steel production and the largest inland oil refinery in our country. These industries foster economic activity and provide good-paying union jobs to thousands of workers in my district. One particular request I would like to draw your attention to is the value of the International Trade Commission. As I mentioned earlier, my district leads the nation in steel production. In order to prevent bad actors from exporting their unemployment to our nation, and my district in particular, we must ensure that the ITC has sufficient funding to uphold our trade laws. As you know, the ITC is required by U.S. law to release its budget justification independently from the Office of Management and Budget. I recently had the opportunity to meet with Chair Kearns and Vice Chair Stan regarding the ITC's fiscal year 2022 budget justification. Most significantly, the funding increase that the Commission is requesting is essential to hire more staff and make necessary information technology investments commensurate with their high record of caseload. The ITC budget justification provides the most complete understanding of its financial needs and offers insight into how inadequate funding levels would impact its ability to enforce our trade laws and protect American workers. Therefore, I request the committee to closely review the ITC's budget justification and fund the ITC at $118.8 million for fiscal year 2022. In closing, I would like to again take a moment to recognize my predecessor, Chairman Visklowski, who served on this committee with distinction for many years. Mr. Visklowski consistently demonstrated the incredible value of House Appropriation Committee and how responsible federal investments can transform regional economies. Chair DeLauro, Ranking Member Granger, and all the members of this committee, I look forward to building on Mr. Visklowski's positive legacy and developing strong collaborative relationships with this committee. I thank you once again for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you very much, and I can attest that Congresswoman Granger and myself had the opportunity to serve with Congressman Visklowski, and proud of his legacy as well. But thank you for your testimony and regarding the ITC and its value going forward. So appreciate your testimony. And with that, let me just introduce Congressman Brian Mast of Florida. for your testimony. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman DeLaura. Thank you, Ranking Member Granger, members of the Appropriations Committee. Today, I'm here to advocate for full Everglades restoration and water quality infrastructure funding. Specifically, I request that $725 million be allocated in the United States Army's Corps of Engineers construction account for South Florida ecosystem restoration in the fiscal year 2022. This committee, it's continually been supportive of Everglades restoration, and for very good reason. The Everglades is a world treasure that has a massive impact on the way of life for millions of Floridians, including those that I represent in Palm Beach County, Martin County, St. Lucie counties of Florida, but going all the way down into Miami and the Florida Keys, and ensuring the preservation of this unique ecosystem. It's vital to the ecology and the economy of public health for all of those across Florida. And we are at a critical juncture in the restoration process to do just that. The Army Corps of Engineers, after years of planning, studying, designing, they've finally reached the point that the comprehensive Everglades restoration plan, where they are making significant progress, where these things can be moved forward with the appropriate funding lines. The Corps is nearing completion on the massive reservoirs to the east and west of Lake Okeechobee that will hold a combined 71 billion gallons of fresh water. They're preparing for construction on the Everglades Agricultural Area Reservoir project that will hold up to 240,000 acre feet of water cleaned by natural treatment areas built by the state so that it can be sent into Everglades National Park, where the water is drastically needed. And that's why at this critical juncture, additional funding is needed. Now, unfortunately, the federal government has fallen behind in that match. They've fallen behind. It's half agreement with the state of Florida in investing $4.5 billion. Well, the federal government has only spent about $1.7 billion in total. President Biden's $350 million request for Everglades restoration, it shows a commitment to these projects, no doubt about it, but more funding is needed in order to keep pace with the projects the Army Corps is ready to move forward with, and with the investment that's already been made into this by the state of Florida, by those agreements. That's why the Florida delegation was united, Democrats and Republicans together, in requesting a $725 million investment for FY 2022. Now, meeting this full request from our delegation would be a strong statement, to say the least, from this committee that restoring America's Everglades and protecting the public health and water supply of Floridians and visitors to our state is a top priority. You may ask why the federal government is involved in this to begin with at the onset, and the fact of the matter is the federal government has to play a role in the solution because it created the problems that exist by building the Herbert Hoover Dike around Lake Okeechobee that sends water into the Florida Everglades, digging canals all across Florida. The unnatural flows of water means that the Everglades are starved for water, while Florida's east and west coasts are sent toxic water that's killing animals, killing seagrass, making people sick, and threatening their lives. And this is all done by the hand of the federal government. So to put an even finer point on it, this is an environmental justice issue on a scale unseen elsewhere in the United States. Last month, the city of West Palm Beach, home to more than 100,000 people, found their water supply contaminated with toxic algae as a result of that failing water infrastructure that we're trying to fix. And that was just weeks after water tested positive for toxins in one of the nearby watersheds, the Pahokee Marina, 100 times more toxic than the EPA said is safe for human contact. That is the urgency of this construction and the needs here. So in that, I just want to say that this is one of the most biodiverse ecosystems that we are looking to protect across the entire country, and providing $725 million for Everglades restoration puts Florida that much closer to making those scenarios that are a nightmare from the past, making them a thing of the past. So I thank you for your consideration for our delegation's requests. And Chairwoman and Ranking Member, Madam Ranking Member, I yield back. Thank you for the time.
Thank you for your testimony, and it is a very healthy request, which I know that the ranking member will agree that it is, but you're a good advocate for all of the Florida delegation in this project with the Everglades. So thank you very, very much for your testimony this morning. Let me recognize Congressman Jason Crow, Colorado. Your testimony, please begin, and you have 5 minutes. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman DeLauro and Ranking Member Granger, for the opportunity to participate in the hearing today. Federal spending is a statement of our nation's priorities, and I appreciate this opportunity to highlight investments that will benefit Colorado's 6th district and the nation as a whole. In particular, I'd like to highlight requests that seek to improve health equity and access to care. For far too long, communities of color and low-income communities have experienced the negative impacts of healthcare inequality. They experienced higher rates of disease, disability, and even death, and were disproportionately impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. To build back better, we must address the systematic inequalities in our healthcare system. So first, my first request for nearly $500,000 for the Black Health Initiative Infant Prematurity and Infant Mortality Project at Children's Hospital Colorado. The Black Health Initiative project aims to combat the maternal and infant mortality racial disparities in Colorado by investing in peer-to-peer support for Black moms and simulated scenario training, which is crucial to identify gaps in provider knowledge and care. By supporting mothers and training providers, we can combat national trends and improve outcomes for Black mothers and babies. Second, I am requesting nearly $1 million for the underrepresented minority pipeline for health professions at the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus. Nationally and in Colorado, our healthcare providers do not reflect the populations they serve. According to the American Association of Medical Colleges, only 2.6% of physicians nationwide are Black, and only 3.8% are Hispanic. This funding would help CU Anschutz scale up its collaboration with local communities in Aurora and Denver to help underrepresented minority students pursue health and science professions. As we emerge from the pandemic and continue efforts to tackle the opioid epidemic, it's important that Congress continue to eliminate barriers to care for individuals struggling with substance abuse and mental health issues. So I am requesting $1 million to support planning and design costs for a new health campus for the Aurora Comprehensive Community Mental Health Center. The health campus model will enable clients to access mental health, detox services, primary care, and oral health services at a single location, eliminating barriers to care. Research has shown that we can help stop community violence in the revolving door of violent injuries in emergency departments through hospital violence intervention programs. These programs connect emergency room patients with hospital and community-based resources aimed at addressing an individual's underlying risk factors for violence. I'm requesting nearly $500,000 to expand the at-risk intervention and mentoring program operated by UC Health in Colorado. So with this funding, UC Health will be able to continue and expand its pilot program to reduce community violence and improve individual outcomes in the greater Aurora community. In addition to these requests that address health equity and access to care, I'd also like to highlight my additional community project funding requests, including $750,000 for the 211 program to upgrade the call system connecting Coloradans, 8,000 local service providers. I'm requesting $948,000 for the purchase of an immune monitoring station to enhance the Cernak Institute's research into Down syndrome at the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus. I'm requesting $948,000 for the purchase, and covered that one already. Requesting $1 million for the Douglas County Generational Opportunities to Achieve Long-Term Success program to construct more housing for housing insecure families. Requesting $1,350,000 for the City of Aurora Safe Outdoor Spaces project. And I'm also requesting $1,700,000 for the Village Exchange Center to expand services by renovating its facilities. And then finally, requesting $2 million to create a domestic violence high-risk team in Adams County, Colorado, to improve services for domestic violence victims. All of these projects will directly benefit some of the most marginalized communities in Colorado's 6th Congressional District and promise systematic improvements that will strengthen not just our community, but countless others across the country. So I urge the community's support, and I look forward to working closely with all of you to ensure these projects are included in the annual appropriations bill. Again, thank you for the opportunity to testify. Madam Chair, I yield back.
I want to thank the gentleman, and I think we're all so much aware that what this pandemic has done is to really expose, though we've known some of these inequities have existed, but it really has shown a light on the issue of disparities with regard to healthcare, and also with the access to care, as you point out, with having a pipeline for health professionals to address underrepresented communities. And thank you for laying out your projects and the thoughtfulness and the efforts with your community to represent their best interests. So I thank you very, very much this morning, and appreciate your testimony this morning. Thank you. Let me at this juncture just ask, not ask, but to acknowledge the members who have joined with us here today for Member Day. This is an opportunity for members throughout the House to be able to come before us with testimony about those issues that they are a champion of for the appropriations process, whether they're programmatic or language requests or the community projects funding requests. If members will just bear with us briefly, because we are trying to literally track down the members who indicated that they wanted to testify this morning. So if you'll just bear with us for a few moments, I appreciate it. Thank you. What I'd want to do is to be mindful of folks' time who are on the call while we're waiting. So let us take a brief recess, and we will get back to you so that you can pick up some of the business that you have to be engaged in. But we will get back as soon as possible when we know more about where the members are who indicated that they were going to testify this morning. So thank you all very, very much, and I thank you for your
10-minute
patience.
recess.
Is it going to be a? Thank you. And with that, let me recognize Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley from Massachusetts. You're recognized for 5 minutes, Congresswoman Pressley. You're muted.
Here we go. Mic check.
There we go.
Okay, all right. Madam Chair, I ask that I get those 3 seconds back. All right. Thank you, Chairwoman DeLauro and members of the committee for the opportunity to testify on my priorities for the fiscal year 2022 appropriations bill. I'm grateful for the opportunity to bring needed resources to the Massachusetts 7th District through community projects, and I welcome the opportunity to highlight these 10 strong initiatives which have robust community support. The COVID-19 pandemic has laid bare the stark inequities in our healthcare system and the disparate health outcomes across demographics. In a wellness assessment in the town of Randolph, a community home to a majority people of color, residents described long-standing barriers to healthcare services, including transportation, long waits, and shortages of providers that accept public insurance. To address this need, I have requested funding to cover the cost of construction of a school-based health center at Randolph High School, which would be accessed both by students and community. At one point, Randolph had the 3rd highest rate of infection in the Commonwealth. With substance use and drug overdoses rising in recent decades, and particularly during the pandemic, I've submitted a request for the Dimmock Center in Roxbury to increase the availability of critically needed substance use treatment and programming. This project would provide approximately 300 additional people annually with vital step-down services after detoxification and assist patients in sustaining wellness, obtaining jobs, reuniting with loved ones, and leading healthy lives. I recently visited with Dimmock and learned with our recent opioid overdose that we have seen a 69% increase in the last year in opioid overdose of Black men. These treatment beds and this sort of wraparound services are sorely needed. Every child deserves an education that meets their individual learning needs, whether it's personalized curricular or culturally responsive reading materials. I've put forward projects on behalf of Randolph and Milton Public Schools, which will go a long way in ensuring students, including children of color, children from lower income families, English language learners, and children with disabilities receive a quality education that prepares them for college and careers of their choice. The pandemic had a devastating impact on Black and Latinx youth enrollment in community colleges, with some estimating that their numbers could fall by up to 30% by this coming fall. I am requesting funding to expand the Boston tuition-free community college program to cover tuition and related expenses for low and moderate income students at one of 6 partner community and technical colleges in Greater Boston. Last summer, Massachusetts had the highest unemployment rate in the country, and the jobs recovery since then has left Black, brown, and low-income families behind. This is especially true in the city of Chelsea, where additional resources are needed to get people back to work. That's why I'm requesting funding to help a local organization, Chelsea Collaborative, launch a pipeline project as part of a citywide workforce development action plan to rapidly reemploy Latinx and immigrant workers who have experienced under and unemployment because of the pandemic. I'm also seeking funding to help a minority serving institution in my district, the Benjamin Franklin Institute of Technology, to launch a new green jobs building automation system certification program to meet the needs of the growing clean energy economy and to provide good paying jobs in the field to their student population. The Island River area is home to 15,000 low-income residents who are primarily people of color, as well as the New England Produce Center and major energy facilities. Coastal flooding resulting from sea level rise and record storms threaten homes, livelihood, and needed infrastructure. The funding I requested for the Island and River Regional Coastal Flood Resiliency Project would bring Chelsea and Everett, 2 towns that have been long denied environmental justice, much closer to preventing further climate change related disaster. I've also requested funding to advance the Poplar Street Pump Station and Art Farm project in Somerville to provide critical stormwater climate change management infrastructure and to create needed community space. And finally, Expanding bicycle lanes has many benefits, including improving health and reducing pollution and traffic. I have requested funding to expand the network of separated bicycle facilities across Cambridge, which will improve the safety of cyclists, the connectivity to major employment areas, and promote biking as an alternative to other modes of transportation. Those in my district closest to the pain will always be my greatest asset. People are our most valuable infrastructure. This is an investment in the people, and I thank the Massachusetts 7th for their partnership and their counsel as I've worked to advance our priorities in Congress. These community-supported projects, Madam Chair, and committee members would immeasurably improve the lives of my constituents, and I request that you give them your strongest consideration.
I thank the gentlelady for her testimony and for the focus on what the pandemic really has brought to light, or the inequities that deal with health, education, jobs, and infrastructure. And you're accurate at that. The focus is about the people in your district and districts all over the country. So thank you very, very much for your testimony this morning.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And let me recognize Congresswoman Lori Trahan from Massachusetts as well. Congresswoman Trahan, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Madam Ranking Member, I appreciate the opportunity to testify before you about two of my highest priorities for the fiscal year 2022 budget. First, thanks to the leadership of this committee, considerable progress has been made over the last 2 years to restore the traditional federal role in assisting communities to meet their Clean Water Act obligations. I'm particularly grateful for the investments that this committee has made since fiscal 2020 in the EPA's Sewer Overflow Control Grants Program. These grants are used to prevent combined sewer overflows, or CSOs, a product of antiquated sewer systems commonly found in our older cities. By design, these systems collect both stormwater and household wastewater for treatment. However, when the volume of effluent exceeds a combined sewer system's capacity, which happens routinely, outfalls empty the waste into nearby bodies of water. Each time CSO events occur, we gamble with exposing our constituents to a toxic stew. A number of years ago, the EPA reported on the health risks associated with allowing untreated sewage to enter our waterways unabated. As one might expect, the CSOs frequently included bacterial pathogens such as E. coli, cholera, salmonella, and the bacteria that causes typhoid fever, as well as several parasites and viruses in CSOs. Too often, these public health risks fall on the shoulders of communities that have historically been victimized by environmental injustices, people who have already endured the brutal consequences of generations of disinvestment and malignant neglect. However, stopping CSOs can be extremely expensive. Indeed, according to the EPA's latest Clean Watersheds Needs Survey, $50 billion is needed to correct CSOs nationwide. And unfortunately, there is no single solution to solve our CSO challenges. Each of the 800 or so communities with combined sewer systems is different. In some, full sewer separation or new public wastewater treatment works may be necessary. In others, green infrastructure solutions such as rain gardens and green roofs may be sufficient. In the 3rd Congressional District of Massachusetts, the district I'm honored to represent, a combination of these approaches is underway to protect the Merrimack River. Nevertheless, the common denominator in nearly every case is the need for additional federal resources, particularly in the form of grants. That's why Representative LaHood and I have filed the Stop Sewage Overflow Act, legislation to double the funding for the Sewer Overflow Control Grants Program, as well as reduce the cost share burden for economically distressed communities. Elements of our proposal were included in the Moving Forward Act last year, and we can be certain that as the climate warms and storms increase, our CSO challenge will grow worse. So please build upon the progress of the last 2 years and include the highest possible funding for the Sewer Overflow Control Grants Program. Second, I would ask that the committee provide a funding boost to the Energy Department's Office of Fusion Energy Sciences consistent with the Energy Act of 2020. Recent breakthroughs in fusion research hold incredible promise for our transition to a clean energy economy, and it led the National Academy of Sciences to recommend in 2019 that the United States foster the R&D necessary for a pilot fusion plant. To that end, last year, Representative Lamb and I filed an amendment to the Clean Energy Jobs and Innovation Act to increase the federal investment in fusion R&D. Our amendment was ultimately incorporated into the Energy Act of 2020. Among the most critical and cost-effective provisions is a DOE-supported milestone-based development program. This section of the law authorizes federal aid to support a full-scale fusion system, but the aid is conditioned on applicants reaching technical milestones along the way. Commonwealth Fusion Systems, a spinoff from MIT, has already begun planning for a proof of concept plant in the 3rd Congressional District, and I'm hopeful that America's clean energy revolution will be born within a few miles of the birthplaces of the American Revolution and our Industrial Revolution. Whatever approach proves to be the most cost-effective and technically feasible, fusion could serve as the foundation for our zero-carbon energy economy of the future. Our need for clean, emissions-free energy is a race against time, not only to prevent the worst effects of climate change, but also to ensure that the United States is the global leader in solving this challenge. So I ask that you include robust funding for the newly authorized Fusion Research and Development Program. And thank you so much for this opportunity today, Madam Chair. I yield back.
I want to thank the gentlelady, and I know that Massachusetts has been leading the way in the fusion area, having been able to meet with some of the folks there. So thank you for the information, and having worked at a city government where we deal with trying to separate storm and stormwater and waste and sewers at another. Both focused on environmental issues here. And thank you very, very much for your testimony this morning. Appreciate it. And with that, let me recognize Congressman Andy Levin from Michigan. Congressman Levin, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman DeLauro. It's great to see you, and Ranking Member Granger. Really appreciate all the members of the committee and the opportunity to speak to you today. You know, with federal funds, community projects in Michigan's 9th District could improve the lives of Macomb and Oakland County residents tremendously. In my limited time today, I'd like to illustrate how that's true and urge you to approve my requests for community project funding. When choosing projects to put forward, I sought out those that would serve my community's most vulnerable residents. One great example of such a project is the Individual Development Account Program at Macomb Community College, which will offer workforce development and certification courses, a necessary step in getting Americans back to work post-COVID. And I'm happy to report, Madam Chairwoman, that Secretary of Education Cardona was with me at Macomb Community College yesterday and had a tremendous visit. More examples are the East Side Community Hub Revitalization Project to improve public facilities and programming to empower at-risk youth and their families, and the Anton Arts Center's Art Space Project to provide affordable housing and creative workspace accommodations for working artists in Mount Clemens. All these projects would make a huge difference in the lives of Macomb County residents in need. I've put forward projects to meet urgent needs in Oakland County as well. For example, the city of Hazel Park hopes to create a community meeting space that can serve as a location for job fairs, educational seminars, and crucially, a heating and cooling center for at-risk residents. Madison Heights plans to renovate and expand its public library, ensuring it remains accessible for the most vulnerable residents who depend on the library for tutoring, job hunting, computer use, and more. In the wake of a crisis that's kept Americans apart, I'm really excited to see leaders in Michigan's 9th invest in spaces that bring us together and keep our community safe. Those investments are being made indoors, but also outdoors. The Clinton River Water Trail improvements in Macomb County will make the trail safer and more accessible. Meanwhile, enhancing the tree canopy in the city of Royal Oak will assist with pollution mitigation, cooling in the summer, and stormwater mitigation in Oakland County. The last point is, I think, particularly important in our community. Sadly, Michiganders know the devastating effects of unsafe water and flooding disasters firsthand. I'm proud to support a number of projects to address those issues. And I'm picking up right where Representative Trahan left off here. The Kensington water main and lead service replacement project would replace a 100-year-old water main and 70 lead service lines in Oakland County. While in Macomb County, the Chapton retention basin in storage expansion would improve the water quality of Lake St. Clair, which is a major drinking water supply for Southeast Michigan. And also in Macomb County, the St. Clair Shores pump station would prevent flooding that's had disproportionate impacts on our area's most vulnerable residents. And I want to point out that the commissioner of the water system over there is your former colleague, Candace Miller. So this is a truly bipartisan effort. My colleagues, I know you have major decisions ahead as you consider the best uses of a modest portion of federal dollars. I simply ask that you give these 10 projects the full consideration they merit. They tackle problems I hear about every day when I meet with constituents and chat with my neighbors, and they do so in a way that makes sure no one gets left behind. I'm really honored to advocate for them today. Thanks so much for your consideration, and with that, I yield back.
Thank you very, very much for the testimony, and I know your constituents are so proud of your advocacy on their behalf, and you can be sure that the projects will get the highest consideration and really taken by the breadth and scope of the range of the projects, and that's gratifying. And as we went down this road in terms of community project funding, so thank you very, very much for your testimony, Congressman Levin.
Thanks, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you. And let me now recognize Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill from New Jersey. And you are now recognized for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman DeLauro, Ranking Member Granger, and members of the committee for providing me the opportunity to testify today. I also want to extend a special nod of thanks to my good friend and colleague from New Jersey, Representative Bonnie Watson-Coleman, for her outstanding work to represent and support our state's priorities on this committee. I want to speak today about a number of crucial projects I've submitted on behalf of my district and the communities and constituents I represent. You've heard from and will continue to hear from a number of members today. Many, if not all of us, will be highlighting the community projects we've submitted for consideration by this committee. For this committee, it may seem tedious, but I assure you, no matter the size, scale, or issue area that these projects fall under, they will be life-changing to the constituents we're here advocating for. For every community, the past year has been exceedingly difficult. The pandemic, the economic fallout, the loss, the isolation, the change in daily routine, kids learning remotely, and families prevented from seeing each other in the most troubling times many of us have ever faced. Every part of this nation was hit hard, but for New Jersey, we were hit hardest and we were hit first. The impact hasn't been lost on those in my district. Whether it's the trauma of loss or loneliness, the financial hardship of closed businesses, or a lost job that threatens housing security, or the uncertainty of what awaits on the other side of this crisis, reopening and getting back to normal is going to be a challenge. But we're well on our way to making that reopening a reality. And now is the time to be making the types of investments that will make us better and stronger than before. So each of these project requests that I've submitted were chosen because they will make a significant difference in people's lives and livelihoods. That's what we as members of Congress need to be doing more than anything right now, finding ways to improve the lives of our constituents and the services in our communities to help ease our recovery and pave the way for a more resilient future. I know that goal is at the heart of every one of you as well, and whether it's the American Rescue Plan, the infrastructure package we're negotiating, or these community projects I'm fighting for, our priorities have been in the right place. And I want to extend my thanks to this committee and the members on it for the role they've played in helping make that case. Now, with that goal in mind, let me name just a few of the projects I've submitted for consideration. $3 million for Morris Habitat for Humanity's largest affordable housing project to date in Randolph, nearly $300,000 for suicide prevention services through the Mental Health Association of Essex and Morris County, $250,000 for a park improvements project in West Orange, specifically designed to enhance ADA accessibility and provide exercise options for seniors, nearly $650,000 in funding for the installation of new lights at a recreation complex in Totowa, $250,000 for the replacement of a water main in Stanhope, $3.1 million for the expansion of a collaborative childcare project through United Way of Northern New Jersey, more than $135,000 for traffic improvements in Morris Plains that provide safe access to public transportation for residents of affordable housing, $255,000 for the replacement of lead pipes and service lines in Bloomfield, $800,000 for a water system upgrade to improve the water system in Hapatcong, and finally $500,000 for the pre-construction engineering efforts for a flood mitigation project on the Peckman River. Some of the benefits of these projects speak for themselves: improvements for clean drinking water and the replacement of lead pipes, aid for a project designed to protect communities, homes, and businesses from flooding, or traffic improvements that will increase pedestrian safety and access to public transportation for an underserved population. These aren't the flashiest projects Congress has ever funded, but they are often the most impactful. And there are always projects like these in our communities that need to be addressed. And then there are those whose importance may have reached a crisis level during the challenges of the past year. Aid to Habitat for Humanity, for example. In my district, they're housing those who may have lost everything during the pandemic. I had the honor of joining as a volunteer on one of their builds just last month, or a project to expand childcare services that will help rebuild New Jersey's early education and care sector when 71% of the family child care providers in the state have been lost. Or perhaps sadly, the most life-saving, the expansion of suicide prevention services when we're in the midst of a mental health crisis only exacerbated by the pandemic. These are the type of projects we need to be funding right now, and I'm proud to be fighting for them here today. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and I yield back.
Thank you so much for your testimony, and they are flashy projects. And really, thank you for your, I think what the community projects funding, as we're listening to colleagues today, have demonstrated that they deal with issues that were in the past, but the issues that were uncovered and exposed by the pandemic, and so that they meet both of those needs. So thank you so much for your testimony this morning. Let me now recognize Congressman James McGovern from Massachusetts, and you are recognized for 5 minutes, Congressman McGovern.
Thank you, Chair DeLauro, Ranking Member Granger, and members of the committee. Thanks for having me. So before I begin, I want to thank this committee, especially Chair DeLauro, for all the work that you have done combating hunger before the pandemic and then certainly during this pandemic. As you know, for too long, our government's response to hunger is about managing it, not ending it. The pandemic brought the realities of the hunger crisis to kitchen tables and living rooms all across the country. And even before COVID, 35 million Americans faced food insecurity in 2019. Hunger makes it harder for children to grow, harder for students to learn, harder for parents to work and take care of their kids. This isn't an urban or rural problem. It's pervasive and can be found in every single congressional district. It is a crisis that we must not accept. Congress has come together before and made great strides on hunger. Following the first ever hunger conference in 1969, my old boss, Senator George McGovern, no relation, but great last name, worked with Senator Bob Dole and others to create what we now know as the SNAP, WIC, and School Breakfast and Lunch Program. And in the face of a global pandemic, this Congress, led by this committee, showed that we can dramatically reduce child poverty and food insecurity. Yet, even with the important work we did, hunger persists. We need permanent solutions so every person in America can feel financially secure, which includes not worrying about how to feed your family. To do this, I will be introducing a bill with Senator Cory Booker to create a White House conference on food, nutrition, hunger, and health to develop a roadmap to end hunger in America by the United Nations global goal of 2030. At the Rules Committee, we're holding hearings and roundtables and traveling to see local innovations at work to bring good ideas back for us to consider, both here in Congress and through the conference. We know hunger is not an issue that breaks down neatly into one department or committee. Rules met recently to discuss hunger among military families and veterans. We learned how high unemployment for military spouses and high child care costs can strain family budgets, and that limited data make understanding the problem harder. We learned how military members are treated differently in SNAP if they live on base or off, and that the transition from active duty to civilian life creates a host of destabilizing challenges. For veterans, we learned that homelessness impacts all other issues, including hunger. And we heard how food banks, one in West Virginia specifically, have been working with local VA hospitals to bring food to vets in need. As VA hospitals grapple with how to add on-site food pantries, civilian hospitals like Boston Medical Center, who testified before the Rules Committee in April, have been doing this for years, both to better serve the community and to stem rising costs. We also learned that limited access to reliable broadband in rural communities makes everything from talking with vets in need to collecting and analyzing data to collecting and rerouting food much, much harder. So many of these issues lie between committee and departmental jurisdictions, making it harder to address problems that are, one, solvable, and two, deserve a solution. So rules will work to build the momentum, but only appropriations can provide the resources. So first, I ask you to set aside $2.5 million to fund the second White House conference in 50 years to focus on food, nutrition, hunger, and health. Second, help us better connect the dots and break down silos. To ensure that this conference is a substantive, policy-oriented effort, we need information from federal departments and agencies immediately. Because the members of this committee can see across the whole field, require the departments and agencies you oversee to think critically about the role they can play in ending hunger. Ask them to identify the challenges and opportunities that exist, examine authority limitations they face, and identify opportunities for better collaboration across government silos. If that sounds like a good common sense idea, it's because it came from a member of this committee, Congressman Cole, who was our ranking member on the Rules Committee. Finally, across the FY 2022 appropriations, look for ways each subcommittee can reduce food insecurity so we can start making things better immediately. You know, Senator Bob Dole wrote Congressman Cole and me recently saying, and I quote, "I remain proud of the work Senator McGovern and I did then, and I endorse your effort to secure a second White House conference to identify the next frontier of programs to finally end hunger in America," end quote. But like Senator Dole, I believe we can still do big things together. So help us in this next and hopefully final frontier to end hunger once and for all. And I thank you and yield back my time.
I thank the gentleman, and let me just say how proud I am to work with you on the issues that you have been a guiding light, a beacon on the issue of hunger, and the term food insecurity just needs to translate into hunger. And the United States is a land of plenty. No one in this country, particularly children, should go to bed hungry at night. So thank you for all of your efforts in this area. And again, proud to work with you. And with that, let me introduce Congresswoman Lizzie Fletcher from Texas. Congresswoman Fletcher, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you so much, Chairwoman DeLauro and Ranking Member Granger, for the opportunity to testify before the committee today about how the appropriations process this year can best support our communities. In particular, I want to highlight the importance of community project funding in ensuring that vital resources reach the communities they're intended to serve by focusing my remarks on a few of the projects in my district that I have submitted to the committee this year. They are a real example of why this funding matters. And this particular point takes us back just a few years first. As you may recall, my district in Houston was devastated during Hurricane Harvey in 2017. Hurricane Harvey was one of the worst disasters in our country's history, with $125 billion in damages, more than any other disaster in U.S. history other than Hurricane Katrina. And across my district, people suffered tremendous damage during Harvey. For some people, it was the second time their homes flooded in as many years. And for some, it was the third, after floods in 2015 and 2016. During and after the storm, we saw our neighbors come together to help one another. And it wasn't just our neighbors here at home. It was our neighbors across the country, including the United States Congress. The 115th Congress voted to appropriate funds in the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2018 to help in our recovery efforts, both immediate assistance and also funds to mitigate future damage by investing in and improving our infrastructure to make our community more resilient. Through the work of this committee, Congress responded by appropriating $2.3 billion in community development block grant funding to the Texas General Land Office, the GLO, entrusting this state office to set up a competitive grant program to fairly distribute these funds for mitigation, federal funds. 2 weeks ago, the GLO announced that neither Houston nor Harris County would be awarded any of the $2 billion in disaster mitigation funds that the Congress sent to Texas after Harvey. Out of more than $1 billion in awards announced, Houston and Harris County, the epicenter of Harvey and the site of tens of billions of dollars in damage, and the site of 3 500-year floods in 3 years, would get zero. And it is clear that the program the GLO designed uses a formula that makes it virtually impossible for Houston and Harris County to get the funds. This is the opposite of what Congress intended. We need these funds. Harvey isn't the only storm we've faced. In the past decade, the Gulf Coast region has suffered increasingly dangerous and destructive hurricanes. And the funding Congress appropriated was intended to help bolster our infrastructure to mitigate the risk and the damage from potential storms. And this is why community project funding is so important. And it is against this backdrop that I want to convey to you how important the specific community project funding I've submitted to the committee is needed at this time. The Meyer Grove Detention Basin, one of the projects that I submitted on behalf of my district, and projects like it are critical to mitigation efforts ensuring safety and resiliency in my district. The proposed detention basin would be a 7.5-acre stormwater detention basin for the conveyance of more than 50 million gallons of stormwater away from nearby residential, commercial, and medical investments. The basin would also protect the downstream Texas Medical Center, the largest medical complex in the world, with the largest children's hospital in the world at Texas Children's Hospital and the largest cancer hospital in the world at MD Anderson Cancer Center. The life-saving treatment and research capacity of the Texas Medical Center for the region is essential for planning and response during public health emergencies. Access by patients, medical professionals, and suppliers to TMC is critical, but the road network for access to it lies in an area prone to flooding. And 4 times in the last 6 years, street flooding has completely cut off access to the medical facility except by boat or high water vehicle. For critical patients, this can result in a loss of life. This much needed project is one of our community's needs. Likewise, critical wastewater and water distribution projects for local municipalities in my district, like the City of Bel Air and the City of Jersey Village that I submitted, are also vitally important projects. In recent years, the original sanitary sewer lines have been failing, allowing stormwater to infiltrate the collection system. And during these weather conditions, stormwater can fill up the collection system, overloading the wastewater treatment plant and forcing the discharge of untreated wastewater into the bio-drainage system. This creates a public health crisis during flooding events. It's critical that Congress fund these important projects and that the members of Congress who know their districts best can ensure that the critical projects can be identified and that congressionally appropriated funds can serve their intended purpose. Unfortunately, we have seen the opposite here in Houston recently with the GLO's announcement. That's why I thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify today. And I urge the committee to include these 3 projects I've identified, as well as all of my submissions to the committee in the fiscal year 2022 funding bills. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you for your testimony, and thank you for your emphasis on disaster relief and the issue of flooding, et cetera. I think a critically important area, and you're accurate. It's gratifying, I think, for Congresswoman Granger and myself to understand that the community projects are working in a way with regard to the best interest of our communities. And thank you for representing that this morning. Appreciate your testimony. Now, with that, I'm going to ask my colleague, Congressman Pete Aguilar, who has agreed to just chair the meeting for the next hour or so, and then I will be back. But I'm grateful to you, Congressman Aguilar, for stepping in and helping with this morning and listening to the testimony. It's been great testimony from our colleagues. So, Congressman Aguilar will take it from here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate your leadership, and we'll see you shortly. Next on the list, do we have Congresswoman Steele from California? We will then go to. Oh, there we go.
Mr. Bolton.
Congresswoman Steele, are you?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chairwoman DeLauro and Ranking Member Granger, members of this committee, for the opportunity to testify today on the importance of Surfside, Sunset, and Newport Beach replenishment project in my congressional district. I represent California's 48th congressional district, which includes the Orange County coastline and our incredible beaches. Seal Beach, Huntington Beach, Laguna Beach, and Newport Beach are all in the 48th district. More than 50 million people visited Orange County and our beautiful beach cities every year. We are proud of our community, our wildlife, and our reputation as one of the most beautiful places in the whole country. Our coastline has historically been replenished with sand from the San Gabriel and Santa Ana rivers. This was a naturally occurring process until the 1940s, until the federal government widened Anaheim Bay and constructed breakwater and jetties to serve the new military bases that opened to boost efforts for the Pacific Fleet. The Army Corps also created flood control projects along 3 local rivers, and breakwaters were constructed to create and protect the Los Angeles Long Beach Harbor. The new construction by federal government created narrowed beaches that are now susceptible to extreme erosion. In 1962, the Army Corps conducted a study and presented their finding to Congress. In that study, the Department of Army proposed measures to mitigate adverse effects of previously constructed projects and its views concerning responsibility for such mitigating measures. House Document 602 acknowledged that the federal government was responsible for the disruption to the naturally occurring replenishment process. Congress accepted the findings from the study and passed Public Law 87 to 874, which approved and authorized the Orange County replenishment. The law also declared that there would be periodic beach nourishment with no time limit on federal aid authorized. The Army Corps began replenishing sand in 1964, placing approximately 18 million cubic yards of sand at Surfside and Sunset Beach over 12 construction stages, which occurred in 5 to 7 years intervals. In 1995, after planning stage 10, the Army Corps abandoned their responsibility to Orange County and decided to stop providing congressionally mandated shoreline protection. In 2000, the Army Corps stated that it was no longer budgeting for future stages. Stage 13 is long overdue and has a non-federal cost share agreement with local stakeholders. They stand ready with over $7 million in funding. As this project continues to be delayed, it's only adding more cost to taxpayers. Had stage 13 been constructed in 2017, when the designs were completed, the total cost would have been approximately $16 million. Now the federal government's cost alone, $10.5 million. Local stakeholders include California Department and Recreation, Huntington Beach, New Seal Beach, and the Surfside Stormwater District. Before serving in Congress, I was Orange County Supervisor during my tenure. I pushed Congress and Army Corps to complete this vital project that is required by U.S. law. I'm here today to urge once again for the funding for this project. It is imperative that Army Corps immediately move forward on this project. The federal government needs to fix the problem it caused, man-made sand erosion. It's a no-brainer. The safety, security, and health of our communities depending on it. Thank you for your time today to address the urgent need for Surfside, Sunset, and Newport Beach replenishment project. I have local resolutions and support letters from Orange County, Huntington Beach, Newport Beach, Seal Beach, photos from July 2020 flood from Newport Beach. I'd love to submit for the record. Thank you, and I yield back.
Without objection, we'll take those for the record. We thank you for talking about that important project, and we know that it was the only project that you submitted for the community funding project programs. With that, we will go to Representative Darren Soto from Florida.
Thank you, Chairman Aguilar, Ranking Member Granger, and members of the Appropriations Committee. I wanted to take a few minutes to give you some impressions about the new budget process. Our new community budget funding request program is an open and transparent process poised to fund key local priorities in fast-growing Central Florida and across the nation. The new rules, as we've seen them in working fashion, are paving the way for an ethical and transparent process worthy of the Congress and our constituents. Hosting website notices and applications, requiring members to sponsor these requests, making the requests public, banning requests from for-profit businesses, and allowing the public enough time to scrutinize these requests are key reforms, and they're instilling integrity, progress, and trust into our budget process again. The day that the Appropriations Committee announced the CBFRs, we immediately put out our notices on our official website, social media, and e-newsletter. We hosted a town hall with local officials and administrators. We provided application tips and deadlines, answered questions, and took suggestions. We gave applicants several weeks to apply, but also enough time for a meaningful review of these projects. We ended up selecting mostly local government proposals since they were well vetted, demonstrated strong support from the community, and had the sophistication and wherewithal to spend said federal funding and complete projects in a timely manner. We also sent out public notice of all the selected projects, which were well received by our local press. Central Florida grew approximately 20% from 2010 to 2020, according to the U.S. Census. Our community has a great need for higher paying jobs, affordable housing, transportation projects, among others. And for years, these decisions were made by DC bureaucrats, far removed from our community and rarely accessible to elected members of Congress. They never knew our communities like members do. As a result, this grant process was a far cry from what our founding fathers anticipated when they drafted Article 1. And I know you all feel the same. We are starting to see our constituents understand the direct value again between the taxes they pay and the local projects being federally funded. And it's critical to a healthy republic to keep our constituents well informed on federal spending locally and ensure they see the value of their taxes and real progress made in our communities. I hope you'll give full and fair consideration to a couple key projects that we put forward for our fast-growing region. First, higher paying jobs. We put forward 2 solar projects at our local high-tech high school and our local community college that'll not only help with renewable energy, but students will learn how to operate and construct solar panels and solar projects. Lake Wales, historically African-American town from the southern rural part of my district, has had a rundown downtown for quite a while. And this project would allow for downtown streetscapes to be upgraded to help small businesses there. In Winter Haven, we have an intermodal station where so many different goods come in. This would allow for them to connect directly to the fiber optic cable deep underground to be able to speed up the technology to move goods. Combating homelessness. Many in the tourism corridor who work at the hotels and motels, they are home insecure. And so the Hope Center's motel conversion would allow for rapid rehousing to occur. Protecting clean water. St. Cloud, another rural community in our district, had issues with resin building up in their water systems. And this would help provide an alternative water supply for this growing rural community. Improving healthcare and public safety with a behavioral outreach mobile crisis unit to help those with mental health issues in rural Polk County, as well as a new fire station in the historic African-American area of Oakland and Haines City, one that has eluded us for many years. And lastly, to promote arts and recreations, the Berlinski House, which They perform community theater in Kissimmee, as well as the Lake Nona Community Center in Orange County, a fast-growing area that lacks that sense of community without being able to have public spaces for people to come together. Thank you, everyone, for this opportunity, and I yield back.
We thank the gentleman from Florida, and we know that you work diligently with your local government partners to come up with those projects. So appreciate the advocacy of you and your district staff in order to submit those requests. Thank you so much. With that, we will go to the gentlewoman from Michigan, Ms. Tlaib.
Thank you so much, Chair Aguilar, and thank you to Chairwoman DeLaura for always being accessible to all of us, and of course our ranking member of the committee, Ranking Member Granger. Many of you always wonder where my passion comes from, and I always remind folks that I grew up in the most beautiful, blackest city in the country, in the city of Detroit. You don't only have one mother in Detroit, you have what you call community mothers watching over you, making sure that you are safe, fed, and loved. And today, I'm not only just serving as their Congress member, but as one of those community mothers, hoping that you will all please help my neighbors. I represent the third poorest congressional district in the country. And this means as a member, I am getting calls from mothers asking me to help them find an early childhood education program, not only for the development of their child, but a place where their child can eat twice a day. I fight so hard to get to the root causes of water shutoffs. Up to 17,000 homes in my district faced water shutoffs alone. And it's because when a mother gets her water shut off, Mr. Chair, not only does she have no access to water, her children are taken away from her. And this is simply wrong. This shouldn't be happening, especially when our state, in the state of Michigan, a multi-billion-dollar corporation like Nestle is paying only $200 a year to extract 1 million gallons of water a day for profit. Since 2012, colleagues, water bills have surged 31% across the nation. This increase in the cost of water is a faster increase than the price of groceries and gasoline. An average American, our neighbors, our residents' households, will pay more for their water in 2 months than Nestle will pay for a year. And this is outrageous and simply disgusting. So, Mr. Chair, when I read about a retired couple, and this is a true story in my district, they had to collect snow in a bucket so to allow it to melt so they can use it to flush their toilet. I knew when I read that story that this was a major crisis. And later I found out this is a national crisis across our country. Water is a human right, and no American should be too poor to live in basic comfort. I ask that you include language preventing all utility shutoffs, water, power, broadband. As many communities are still struggling to recover from the pandemic, we cannot allow these essential services to be ripped away. I can ask also, please, to support at the highest level of funding for our clean water and drinking water state revolving funds. This is so critically important. These funds are critical to delivering clean water to communities like ours and provides long overdue improvements to water infrastructure. Over 60 schools in one of my cities placed garbage bags over their school drinking fountains because the water is too contaminated, just full of lead. Our children deserve us to be bold and aggressive on addressing water crisis. What happened to Flint, y'all, that experience, which is still has not truly been fixed, is happening across the country. The Low-Income Household Water Assistance Program is another program that needs continued support at a higher level. But please know this, we can't just support what we call LAWAP if we don't also require reconnection services and allow us to use some of that funding for public plumbing services, which helps us get to the root causes of the high water costs. What's even worse about our continued support of LAWAP is that we cannot have a situation, this is exactly what we have, where we have neighbors applying for assistance through LAWAP, and we fought really hard to get money in there. And then the water department and the utility companies are not required to reinstate access to water. Over 100 community advocacy organizations and public health organizations estimate that we need $4 billion to truly have a dent into helping our neighbors access water. We cannot continue, y'all, to throw money at a crisis of this size and not attach, again, requirements for reconnection services and also provisions that ensure our residents are protected and that the program gets, again, to the root causes of the high cost of water. With that, Mr. Chair, and again, Ranking Member Granger, I hope that you will look to me as a resource. In the city of Detroit, in my district, we birthed movements, not only labor rights movement, the civil rights movement, but this movement on access to water was birthed right here. And we hope that you look to us as not only as a resource, but also to tell the human stories behind what is happening and doing nothing about the water crisis. Thank you, and I yield.
Thank you so much, Representative Tlaib. We know that you are a passionate advocate for your communities and have been such a thought leader on the issues about water and food security and poverty programs within our community. So thanks so much. With that, we will go to Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee from Texas.
Good morning. It is still morning here. Thank you so very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the ranking member for your leadership, and of course our chairman's leadership, Rosa DeLauro. Collectively, the Appropriations Committee is working very hard, and I'm very grateful for that. This time that we have is really a hand up and not a hand out. Our communities want hands up. They want to be able to self-help. And the idea of the new, transparent, and very effective opportunity for community projects is crucial to languishing communities. I want to applaud my mayor, who has established something called the community projects or community complete communities, which is to work on these inner city communities and as well areas that are almost rural to be able to say, you count. I want to share with you the structure that we use. This is show and tell. I think you can see it. We have something called accounts eligible for community project requests. We went right to our website and made sure all of our community was aware. We engaged with our partners and discussed with them how best to be effective in their presentations. And now I come to you, hopefully, to secure your consideration of these very important projects. One that we're really invested in is our young people. I chair the Congressional Children's Caucus. And so the Fifth Ward Community Redevelopment Project, and I've been very modest in my request, $1 million that has a court system in the inner city, will support a juvenile justice diversion program right in the inner city where Barbara Jordan was born, working with Pleasant Hill Ministries in partnership with the Harris County District Attorney's Office, critically needed community program that has assisted an average of 100 children each year. It will provide for a diversion as opposed to going, in quotes, downtown and winding up in a juvenile jail or maybe in the Harris County Jail. It has saved so many lives in diversion, and this would help us do even more. The East End, the funding would construct the Bethune Empowerment Center and the East End facility for Latino arts, merging the Black and Brown community, which is so crucial, building up an art center in one area and building up an empowerment center, an incubator for businesses in another historic community called Acres Home. What a perfect matching to come together. And that is my project for $4 million. And then, of course, the historic program at the historic Booker T. Washington High School. We know Booker T. Washington is one of our leaders in the idea of working with one's hands and building up. This school has a great idea, getting with climate change, teaching our children about food education and production, working with a garden, helping to raise beds that will deal with carbon dioxide, a wind farm. What a wonderful and important responsibility for our children. The Houston Independent School District program, again, project engagement. That is $1 million project dealing with emotional learning for our children, which is so very important. The city of San Jacinto, one of my small cities, again, what do they need? Water. And so this project will allow water distribution lines that are at least 75 years old to
We will, if we could pause the time and see if we can get Representative Jackson Lee back on. Next in the queue, let's give Representative Jackson Lee a couple seconds, but Representative Schreier, you were on deck if we can't figure out the tech issues or in a minute and 30 seconds.
Can you hear me now, Mademoiselle?
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
We can hear you. I can't see you.
Well, hey, Pete, you know that might be good. You can't see me. But hey, I don't mind. Hey, I don't mind.
Mr. Cole. Mr. Cole told the committee that you have a face for radio, but we didn't believe that.
Hey, Tom Cole only tells the truth. It hurts my feelings, but that's okay.
Mr. Wilson, we are waiting Representative Jackson Lee to see if she can join us back. She had some tech issues. On deck, we have Ms. Schreier, but if we can figure out your issues and get your video, then you will be after that, if that's okay.
That'd be fine. Thank you.
Thank you so much. But let's see if we can sort out the video as well. Ms. Schreier, why don't we go to you? We will pause and give Representative Jackson Lee her 90 seconds back when she joins us. But feel free to start. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Chairman Aguilar and Ranking Member Granger as well. I appreciate the opportunity to share my priorities on behalf of Washington State's 8th Congressional District. I am proud of all the community projects and programmatic appropriations requests I submitted this year. However, with today's time constraints, I just want to highlight a few. So as you consider funding for fiscal year 2022, I'd like to express my strong support to improve our nation's recycling system with a specific focus on plastics recycling. The 2020 study by the EPA found that the current U.S. recycling system faces several challenges, including confusion about what materials can be recycled and recycling infrastructure that has not kept pace with today's diverse and changing, increasing waste stream. And to help address some of these challenges, my letter to appropriators asked for more funding for 2 of the EPA's recycling grant programs. One, the Post-Consumer Materials Management Infrastructure Grant Program provides federal funding to help strengthen local recycling programs. Local government serves the backbone for our nation's recycling system, assuming nearly full responsibility for the cost of residential recycling education, collection, and operation. And these funds will provide local governments with the resources they need. The other is the Trash-Free Waters Drinking Water Infrastructure and Wastewater Infrastructure Grant Programs. Debris, particularly plastic pollution, is a global crisis. These grant programs provide the needed funds to keep plastic waste and other post-consumer materials out of landfills and waterways, helping to protect our health, well-being, and the environment. The need for us to manage our own waste has become especially urgent since foreign recycling operations no longer accept U.S. plastics. So strengthening recycling infrastructure and markets for recycled materials within communities across the nation is imperative to increasing the economic and environmental viability of a recycling system. The next priority I'd love to bring to your attention is funding within the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response, or ASPR, to continue development of rapid at-home COVID-19 tests, as well as support for interagency coordinated testing strategy. Even as vaccines are rolling out and offer a light at the end of the tunnel, we know that COVID-19 continues to circulate and mutate, and without widely available, inexpensive rapid testing, this will continue to be a difficult disease to control. So easily accessible tests with a fast result that can be taken at home, school, the workplace without a prescription can help Americans minimize the risk of infection, whichever course this disease takes. This is especially important now for families with younger children who don't yet have access to the vaccine. Large-scale surveillance and use of rapid testing will allow childcare facilities and schools to open and stay open and will reassure many parents. Finally, I'd like to highlight 2 of my community project funding submissions. The month of May marks the beginning of traditional wildfire season. However, my state has already had well over 200 fires this year. If funded, the Cleellum Ridge Phase 1 Wildfire Protection Plan will initiate a series of forest management interventions to help prevent wildfires from getting out of control. The Washington Department of Natural Resources identified the city of Roslyn within the Cleellum Ridge as one of our state's communities at greatest risk. In 2017, the Jolly Mountain Fire threatened the city of Roslyn and surrounding communities, and the suppression cost for the Jolly Mountain Fire exceeded $35 million. Had the proposed forest health work been done, Jolly Mountain would likely have been a managed fire with far less threat to the community and firefighters and far reduced suppression costs. So please consider the critical role this will play and an example for other communities. Another project is the school-based health clinic at Graham Kapowsin High School. This construction will help provide a health clinic to support the medical, dental, and behavioral health needs of approximately 3,500 students on campus. The proposed clinic would serve a rural population in great need of care, and having a facility like this on campus will help reach students quickly. Lastly, I was incredibly excited to see President Biden's budget that includes two of my other priorities, the Legacy Roads and Trails program, and also proposed extension to the increase in the WIC cash value vouchers for fresh fruits and vegetables. So thank you for your consideration, and I yield back.
Thanks so much, Dr. Schreier. We appreciate your advocacy. We saw the project lists on water, wastewater, wildfire management, all representative of your district, and we appreciate it. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Of course. Committee members, we're gonna, I thought we had Representative Jackson Lee. If she comes back, we will give her 90 seconds. Next on the list, we have Representative Wilson for 5 minutes. So Joe Wilson, and then Ms. Gonzalez-Colon, you are on deck. Go ahead, Mr. Wilson. Oh, we have you on mute.
Hey, Acting Chairman Pete Aguilar and Ranking Member Kay Granger. Thank you for your leadership on the committee. I am representing the 2nd District in Grateful of South Carolina and the home of the historic Savannah River site. The Savannah River site was constructed during the early 1950s to support national defense programs for victory in the Cold War. The site maintains the responsibility 70 years later through its national laboratory, NNSA missions, and environmental cleanup. I asked the committee to consider the following for the site: to support the President's budget for the Savannah River Plutonium Processing Facility and the Savannah River Plutonium Operations. As part of the two-site solution to plutonium pit production, the facility will provide the capability of producing no fewer than 80 plutonium pits per year by 2030. With pits in our national inventory, nuclear inventory, aging over 60 years, our nation cannot afford to reach a point where we question whether or not the nuclear weapons work. I support the President's number 2 request for the Tritium finishing facility. The site is home to the Savannah River Tritium Enterprise, which prepares the nation's only tritium supply for our national defense. This new facility will replace an aged facility constructed in the 1950s that currently faces age-related problems and maintenance costs that could jeopardize tritium production operations necessary to maintain the U.S. nuclear deterrent. 3, support the President's budget request for the surplus plutonium disposition project. This project at the site will safely dispose of 24 metric tons of surplus plutonium through the dilute and dispose process. This project requires the installation of 3 new glove boxes, ventilation, fire protection, and other support equipment to expand the existing facility. 4, $11,549,000 for the Savannah River site community and regulatory support. This secures payment in lieu of taxes for Aiken, Barnwell, and Allendale counties, where the site is located, which I represent with Congressman Jim Clyburn. This funding request matches what's been appropriated in prior years, and payments go to support local school districts, emergency services, and county operations. 3, or number 5, $543,784 for the Savannah River Risk Management Operations. This request will allow critical missions like H Canyon at the SRS to proceed uninterrupted and continue processing of spent nuclear fuels. These funds will also maintain operations aligned with the Liquid Waste Life Cycle Program, cover necessary replacements to aged equipment, and provide critical infrastructure improvements. 6, $1,046,000,000 for the Savannah River radioactive liquid tank waste stabilization and disposition. This request includes continuation of hot operations of the salt waste processing facility, the defense waste processing facility, as well as continuing construction of saltstone disposal units to accommodate the increased amount of waste being processed. 7, $80 million for the Savannah River Nuclear Laboratory radiological facilities. The Savannah River National Laboratory operates a suite of RAD facilities that provide technical and operation support for NNSA missions. And effective June 2021, the lab will become a separate management and operations contract to cover the high cost of operating and maintaining radiological facilities. The lab overhead would create significantly the increase of cost, making the laboratory uncompetitive for numerous non-radiological programs at the laboratory. By creating a control point for the lab, it should prevent this problem and allow the Savannah River Nuclear Laboratory to safely operate the radiological facilities. Thank you for your time and consideration, and I appreciate your consideration of the request. And again, thank you, Acting Chairman Aguilar, for being so accommodating.
Thank you so much.
With Ranking Member Kay Granger.
Of course, of course. Thank you. And it doesn't surprise anyone on this committee. Your advocacy for Savannah River National Lab is someone who served in the Armed Services Committee with you. I know you're passionate about these issues and a strong national defense and protecting our country with the work that the labs do. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Representative Gonzalez Colon, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you for allowing me, and I want to thank Chairman DeLauro and Ranking Member Granger for the opportunity to testify on some of Puerto Rico priorities for the next fiscal year. I would like to focus my testimony today on the 10 community project funding requests I submitted on behalf of my constituents for the committee consideration. These span a variety of issues crucial for both low-income and rural communities on the island, including water infrastructure improvement, food security, public safety, services for underserved populations, and projects to spur economic development. First, I'm requesting that the committee provide the necessary funding to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to finally begin the construction phase of the Caño Martin Peña Ecosystem Restoration Project. This is an authorized project that will help address detrimental conditions currently challenging the health and well-being of approximately 26,000 residents across 8 communities in San Juan. The area's economic development and critical infrastructure like the Luis Muñoz Marin International Airport in San Juan. I'm also requesting funding for the Inter-American University of Puerto Rico, Barranquitas campus, to build the Center for Food Security and Sustainable Agriculture, which will expand their laboratory capabilities and maximize agricultural production by developing in vitro seeds to be used by local farmers and researchers. This will turn in support of food security, agricultural research, and crop production in Puerto Rico, all while assisting the economies of our rural municipalities in the island's mountainous central region. To improve public safety in the rural municipality of Utuado, I requested assistance under the Burn JAG account to help purchase law enforcement equipment for municipal police force, including bulletproof vests and technological equipment. I also submitted a request on behalf of SER of Puerto Rico, a nonprofit organization on the island that is seeking funding to finance a program to support the comprehensive development of children diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder in Puerto Rico from the ages of 18 months to 6 years, based on principles of applied behavioral analysis. Lastly, I submitted 6 requests under the Economic Development Initiative account to address pressing needs in some of our low-income communities. For instance, funding to build stormwater infrastructure in the only public landfill in the municipality of Lajas, and help extend its use by 25 years. Assistance to the municipality of Jauco to fund construction of a new well and other improvements for the community water system in Rubia sectors, a low-income rural community that has historically lacked reliable water service. Funding for the Puerto Rico Department of Agriculture to rehabilitate and address some of the infrastructure needs of the Jarialito fishing village in Arecibo. This will be crucial to ensure it complies with appropriate food safety standards and can continue to support fishing activities, which are one of the main economic drivers of nearby low-income coastal communities. Financial assistance to the Boys and Girls Club of Puerto Rico to rehabilitate an unused public school they acquired to build their new community facility in the municipality of San Lorenzo, and thus make it suitable to serve students, residents, and their employees. On behalf of the municipality of Patillas, funding to rehabilitate the forestal Carite Forest Recreation Area. And on behalf of the municipality of Vega Alta, request to fund the construction of agritourism complex. Both projects seek to promote tourism and generate economic growth in these areas. And I respectfully ask the committee to consider all 10 of these requests, which have strong community support and will help address important issues on the island. So thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Gonzalez Colon, for your advocacy on behalf of the island. We appreciate it, and we have those items that you submitted. With that, we will go to Representative Fitzpatrick from Pennsylvania, followed by Representative Sherman from California. Mr. Fitzpatrick, you have 5 minutes.
I thank the chairman and the ranking member for convening this Member Day hearing, and I'd like to speak briefly about my top appropriations requests. Mr. Chairman, our country is currently facing an array of challenges relating to infrastructure, relating to immigration, relating to healthcare, as well as the ongoing struggles of the COVID-19 pandemic. And despite these realities, most members of Congress currently receive an annual salary of approximately $170,000 a year, which is more than approximately 90% of American households. The question we should all be asking: why should members of Congress, whose job it is to serve the American people, receive a pay raise when our constituents are struggling to pay their bills? The answer is clear: we shouldn't. And I commend the Legislative Branch Subcommittee for including language during the fiscal year 2021 that prevented members of Congress from receiving a pay raise. And I hope that we can push this issue even further by adding that language to the appropriations bill for fiscal year 2022. Specifically, Mr. Chairman, I'd ask that the language be written into the appropriations bill to state that no adjustment be made under Section 601, subset A of the Legislative Reorganization Act of 1946 related to the cost of living adjustments for members of Congress. Representing our communities in Congress, as we all know, is all about public service. And that's why including this language is vital to moving our country forward in a bipartisan, bicameral way. Another issue, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to bring to your attention is the impact that PFAS chemicals are having on so many of our communities, including ours in suburban Philadelphia and Pennsylvania. These forever chemicals, which are used in everyday items, have been found in high concentrations in sources of drinking water and other sites around the country. Just to my backyard. Mr. Chairman, in my own district, I've been actively working with local officials to address PFAS contamination experienced by communities surrounding the former Naval Air Warfare Center in Warminster and the former Willow Grove Naval Air Station Joint Reserve Base, as well as a Horsham Air Guard Station. We need to crack down on these harmful chemicals to keep our constituents safe from contaminated water. Earlier this year, alongside my colleagues on the Congressional PFAS Task Force, we sent a letter to the President with nearly 100 co-signers asking to work with the administration on these PFAS issues. And specifically, we raised the need to institute a national drinking water standard and designate even more PFAS chemicals as hazardous. There are more than 700 active military installations around the country with PFAS contamination. And on March 24th of 2021, Paul Kramer, the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Sustainment, testified that it would cost approximately $2 to $3 billion to fully clean up PFAS contamination at and around current and former military bases. And I asked that there be an increased funding for PFAS cleanup. This is a necessary step to ensure that a vigorous and successful cleanup is actually carried out. And as the co-chair of the Congressional PFAS Task Force, we're going to continue to fight for our community's rights to safe and clean drinking water. Mr. Chairman, the ranking member, I appreciate your consideration of these important priorities that I've spoken about here today, and I yield back.
Thank you so much, Representative Fitzpatrick. We appreciate your work on the PFAS task force. And I know this committee does not take that issue lightly. Chairwoman DeLauro and Defense Chairwoman McCollum have been having conversations with committee members about these topics. So thanks for your continued work on this.
Thank you, sir.
Of course, Representative Sherman from California. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I may start by taking just a minute to disagree with Mr. Fitzpatrick. I do not think the decision is not whether members of Congress get a pay raise, but whether we get an inflation adjustment. We have passed up the inflation and
We lost your audio there, Brad.
adjustment. Can I be heard?
Yes, we can hear you.
As I was saying,
we're going to go to Brad. I'm sorry. We're gonna start you over and sort that out. If we could go to Representative Cloud, and then we will come right back to you, Brad. You will be on deck. I'm sorry about that. Representative Cloud.
Well, thank you, Chair. And if I have similar issues, you can count it up probably from both of us as just a good, strong case for rural broadband. I thank you, Chair. I thank you, Ranking Member, for allowing us to come and speak to you today. Important power of the purse, of course, with Congress. Spending taxpayer dollars is a weighty responsibility that we all take seriously. And that's why at the end of April, I submitted
Representative Cloud, I'm sorry we're having some of the same.
Okay. Well,
let's it's working now. So let's go with it. But I'll interrupt you if we have some issues.
Direct the Congressional Budget Office and coordinate.
We're gonna have to pause. We're gonna have to pause that. I'm sorry. I just want to make sure that the committee can hear your testimony.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
No. So we will pause that and sort it out and get a little bit of technical help. We're working to get the next member in, colleagues. As a reminder, we've got 2 folks sorting out audio issues in the breakout room, and I think we still have Ms. Jackson Lee with 90 seconds remaining that we will offer to give her back. But I believe we also have another colleague that is joining us here shortly. So appreciate your patience and sticking with us.
Mr. Chair, while we're waiting, I just want to congratulate you on your dream catcher in the background.
I've got two great Choctaw pieces behind me. I should tilt this because they're cattle horns with the appropriate feather accompaniment. But it pleases me to see you have a restful atmosphere where you're at.
Yeah, we need it in this line of work, don't we, Mr. Cole?
I think every office should have a dream catcher.
Mr. Chair, am I on now, or am I need to wait?
You, if we can get your audio, if we can get your video working, then we can proceed.
Okay, I can see myself, but you're saying you can't see me.
We cannot see you, Ms. Jackson Lee.
And can I do an audio check here? Can I be heard?
Yeah, Mr. Sherman, we can hear you, but we cannot see you.
Oh, I see. So we have to wait, Mr. Chairman, on your side, your tech side. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, you correct. Let me get the okay and see where we're going. Going next. Apologies, but we can hear you both clearly. And I know Mr. Cloud also put in the chat that he was having some bandwidth issues as well. So let me get a little bit of clarity, and we will come back.
We're very appreciative. Thank you so very much.
Of course, no, thanks for your patience. We appreciate it. Oh, Miss Jackson Lee, there you go. We can see you.
And can you hear me?
We can hear you and we can see you. So my recollection was you had 90 seconds, but please feel free to finish your testimony to the committee.
First of all, thank you for the courtesies of this committee. I think you have all seen me over the years, how much I value the opportunity. So let me quickly, I think I know where I was. I'll just start again with Texas Southern University, a historically Black college. And again, I tried to emphasize to be as fiscally responsible as possible, but this will fund the urban public health initiatives dealing with health professions, education, workforce development, sort of overlaying the inner city's impact by COVID-19. My request for the funding for the Houston Community College is a regional resiliency operations center, again, for training. That is a major issue dealing with our community. And as I see on the screen, the chair of the committee dealing with Homeland Security, we are the epicenter of disaster and the need for mitigation. And so we need these kinds of trained professionals, and we appreciate your consideration. The Port of Houston, this is our economic engine. In Hurricane Harvey, it suffered extensively. It's a man-made port, and this funding will help to begin the sedimentation study, which happens all the time, the increased sedimentation. Let me bring my remarks to a close. As I mentioned, the President's American Rescue Plan that needs to help speed the delivery of Metro's transit plan, which includes the following dollars for light rail, for bus rapid transit. These are dollars within your purview, $2.10 billion, which will impact the growth of my Houston Metro, which is a young transit system in a city that is overwhelmed by traffic. $3.23 billion for bus rapid, $1.56 billion for new and improved high occupancy rate, $175 million for enhancement of high frequency, and $414 million for new and improved park and ride. I support all of that. And the Metro Next is a $7.5 billion 20 billion 20-year transit plan that was approved by the voters. We are in need of the ending of our excessive carbon and air pollution, and we appreciate it. I'm concluding on this. The committee is cognizant of the vulnerabilities of the safety and security of persons, property, and interests working or located in the U.S. Capitol and its environments. On the insurrection that occurred on January 6th, when an incited mob of domestic terrorists, white nationalists, and supremacists laid siege to the Capitol building in order to disrupt a constitutionally mandated duty of the Congress, was a dark stain on the nation's history, exacerbated by the fact that we saw our brave law enforcement, but tragically we heard and reports show that those who took the oath, law enforcement officers, members of the military and civil service, and contractors were part of that mob. The U.S. Intelligence Committee has assessed that domestic terrorism
particularly white supremacy and white nationalist organizations, is greatest and most imminent threat to our nation and democratic form of government. The committee applauds the service and sacrifice of men and women who serve the American people in the civilian and military sectors of government. However, I would appreciate language being considered by this committee that cautions and directs the secretary of all agencies to exercise vigilance and take decisive action to identify, isolate, and remove from service individuals whose actions on January 6, 2021 at the U.S. Capitol, or whose connections, actions, or affiliations with white nationalist organizations pose a threat to the security of the United States. Actions the secretary should take include undertaking an immediate review of a clearance when a security clearance holder is reported to have engaged in violent acts against individuals, property, or public spaces based on the security clearance holders association or sympathy with persons or organizations that advocate, threaten, or use force or violence of any other illegal or unconstitutional means in an effort to prevent others from exercising their rights under the Constitution. I'd appreciate it if this language would be considered because people in service to this nation have taken an oath should not be in contrast fighting against this nation and participating in an insurrection.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson.
For your consideration of my projects, and we work very hard to interact with our community, and they are sitting on their chairs with bated breath as to whether or not they'll have an opportunity to receive these funds. I thank you for your courtesies and this great effort that we have.
We thank the Congresswoman from Texas, and again, thanks for your patience and apologies for that delay. We're going to go to
thank you,
Representative Bowman from New York, and then we will circle back to Mr. Sherman after Mr. Bowman. Mr. Bowman, you have 5 minutes. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Chair DeLauro, Ranking Member Granger, for the opportunity to testify before the Appropriations Committee today. I recently had the opportunity to testify before the Labor HHS Education Subcommittee, and at this time would like to expand on that testimony now that we have President Biden's complete budget request for the upcoming fiscal year. I deeply appreciate the incredible work this committee carries out under your leadership, not only for our regular fiscal year spending, but for the COVID relief packages and the anticipated infrastructure package. I'm here to testify in support of robust investments in programs that directly impact children and families in my district, which cover parts of the Bronx and Westchester County, New York. I'll start off by noting my support for President Biden's budget request, which reflects an understanding of the moment we find ourselves in as a nation. Modest, incremental plus-ups to historically underfunded programs will never match the care and repair our communities need due to compounding crises such as the COVID-19, racial injustice, gun violence, growing wealth inequality, and the climate crisis. This is not a disparate list. These are all interconnected and extremely traumatic. Without meaningful aid to our communities, our children and families can very quickly find themselves isolated and unsupported. I commend this budget request for recognizing the need for substantial investments. We need to build upon it, not whittle it down further. I strongly urge that we don't negotiate ourselves out of finally securing a healthy and safe future for all our children, communities, and the planet. I previously testified in support of strong investments for all early childhood education programs, such as Head Start and the Child Care Development Block Grant, as well as full-service community schools, IDEA, and Title II-A funding. I would like to build on that testimony and address two more priorities for the committee's consideration as it writes the spending bills for fiscal year 2022. As a former teacher, school counselor, and middle school principal, I think it's only right that the subcommittee responsible for education funding at the federal level enjoys the largest share of non-defense spending. I'm encouraged to see that the Biden administration clearly understands we need to substantially invest in Title I. What we really ought to do is quadruple Title I funding, which would make a meaningful impact for students, teachers, and families in my district and many others across the country. A significant down payment towards that is the next best thing. However, I am cautious about the proposal to carve out $20 billion under Title I with a new formula that we have limited details about. I'm concerned that this funding could be available for charter schools at a time when we need, at minimum, more oversight over charter schools, not additional funding sources when they already access a multitude, including through the new market tax credit. This is particularly concerning to me with respect to charter schools that contract with for-profit entities. I would strongly recommend that the committee include the funding level requested for Title I, but maintain its current funding formula. I want to commend this budget proposal for investing in broadband and would urge that we build upon it. Inequitable access to broadband took a substantial impact on students and families during the pandemic. We saw students trying to use the Wi-Fi at local restaurants and trying to complete homework on a cell phone. People struggled to apply online for jobs. Families couldn't reliably communicate with loved ones. This is a particularly limiting hardship for HUD-assisted households who often receive inadequate access to the internet. We need to rethink broadband as a basic utility, which is why I introduced the Broadband Justice Act earlier this Congress to establish a new grant program that would expand affordable broadband access to millions of families living in subsidized housing. My bill would further update utility allowance definitions used by HUD, Treasury, and the USDA to include broadband as a subsidized utility in addition to retrofitting subsidized housing with the necessary wiring for high-quality broadband. My district includes Co-op City in the Bronx, which is the largest affordable housing community in the country. I strongly urge the committee to direct HUD to analyze this topic specifically and make their findings available 1 year after enactment. And we further explore mechanisms for providing high-quality subsidized broadband to assist households, including through the expansion of monthly utility subsidies to include broadband. Thank you, and I yield back my time.
Thank you, Representative Bowman. We appreciate it, and for those scoring at home, they know we have members from all over the country have our own broadband issues here as well. So we know that many investments are needed, but thanks for your work on behalf of your constituents related to that. The committee has your requests, and we appreciate your time here today. Representative Sherman, I think we have you.
Thank you. Can I be heard?
Yes, you may. If you could start at the top again, Representative Sherman, that would be great.
I'll start by just taking a minute to disagree with one of the former speakers. I think it was Mr. Fitzpatrick who argued against any cost of living increase for members of Congress. First, this isn't a pay increase. It's keeping up with inflation, and inflation has been modest, I realize. Second, over the last 20 years, the purchasing power of what members of Congress get paid has dropped by over 20%. I, for one, don't think I'm 20% less valuable now than I was when I first arrived. But if congressional people in Congress tend to have some talents that the private sector would prize, and if we're in a situation where the differential between what someone makes in the private sector and what makes in Congress is enormous, then the only people who will serve in Congress are people so wealthy that the congressional salary is an irrelevancy to them. I want to thank this committee for, since 2012, including in its base text, the War Powers Act enforcement provision. This was added to the in 2011 due to a floor vote, but the committee has included it in every bill since then. It provides that no money shall be spent in contravention of the War Powers Act, and in the opinion of many constitutional scholars, is the thing that would make the War Powers Act, which is the only limit on the president just sending troops anywhere, anytime, for any reason, it's the only thing that would make it enforceable on a president. So I urge you to continue to do what you have been doing, and that is including it in the base text. I want to urge you to provide $2 million in funding for the people of Artsakh, particularly mine removal, and to include language preventing any aid to Azerbaijan until it changes its policies. I request that you provide $2 million for Sindhi language outreach by the Voice of America so that we can reach the people of southern Pakistan. We're talking about 30 million people for whom Sindhi is their primary language, and reaching these people is so important. And the amount I'm suggesting here is $2 million. I also have a request for the Middle East, which is both the smallest and the least controversial item involving the Middle East, and that is $6 million for the U.S.-Israel Energy Cooperation Agreement, and an additional $2 million for bilateral cooperation on COVID and developing treatments and vaccines. Keep in mind that these programs are paid half by Israeli taxpayers and half by American taxpayers, and therefore we get double the bang for the buck. Two issues that relate to the quality of life in my part of the world, but other parts of the world as well. The first is the whole Quiet Skies Caucus has urged you to include language telling the FAA to prioritize airport noise as an important issue in making its decisions. I think it's critical that that language be included. And then second, we have on the immediately adjacent to the city limits of Los Angeles, the Santa Susana Field Lab, a site with both chemical and nuclear waste that needs to be cleaned up, and that I hope that you will provide the highest possible funding both to NASA and the Department of Energy, who both have toxic nuclear waste at that location, to make so that they will do the cleanup that they've promised to do and contracted to do. And with that, yield back.
We appreciate your testimony, Representative Sherman, and thanks so much for your patience in letting us navigate that. So the committee appreciates the time. With that, we will go to Representative Cloud from Texas. I think we have things sorted out.
Thank you. We'll give it another go, and I appreciate yours and the committee's patience on this. Basically, I wanted to take a moment to bring the committee's attention to some language we submitted back in April. We all know that our responsibility to manage the power of the purse with the Joint Committee on Taxation to study the feasibility of including in their cost estimates the associated cost of debt servicing and a list of duplicate programs. Without these two pieces of information, members of Congress are left to evaluate legislation based on an incomplete or even inaccurate understanding of the facts. Folks back home understand this. If you were to purchase a car, for example, and only looked at the list price without calculating the interest, you would find out that the car cost a lot more than you were expecting, and that happens with bills here in Congress. In essence, we do the same thing by not considering the comprehensive budgetary impact of spending and taxing proposals. This distorts congressional decision-making in favor of more spending and debt accumulation that might otherwise be the case. Simply put, including the debt servicing costs and legislation cost estimates will better equip us to make informed spending decisions. This language request does one other important thing that would help us. Within the covered legislation. If cost estimates were required to point out duplication, it would give members helpful direction in knowing how to better use taxpayer dollars. Thankfully, this is not a Republican or a Democrat issue. Last Congress, Representative Ed Case and I worked closely together to lead a bicameral bipartisan letter to the chairs and ranking members of the House and Senate budget committees requesting they direct the CBO to include debt servicing costs in all legislative cost estimates produced. Lastly, on May 12th, 2021, the Bureau of Labor Statistics announced that inflation had grown by 4.2% over the last year, the largest 12-month increase since September 2008. Well before the inflation announcement was made, CBO had been estimating the net interest costs would exceed other mandatory spending by 2030, exceed all discretionary spending by 2043, and surpass spending for Social Security by 2045. If this inflation isn't sustained, interest rates will rise and rapidly advance the timeline in which debt servicing eclipses all other spending. Reining in our debt and deficits only gets harder the longer we wait. That's in part because our interest rates have been historically low. Again, this isn't a red or blue, Republican or Democrat issue. This is simply a good governance issue that hopefully we can all get behind. I hope we'll consider including the language in the final bill to begin the process moving forward on this issue. Again, thank you for the opportunity to appear here today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for your patience, Representative Cloud, and we appreciate your work on that and the submittals that you have to Ledge Branch. Thanks so much. With that, I will hand it back over to Chairwoman DeLauro.
Thank you so much. I want to thank you, my colleague and friend, for picking up the baton here and getting us through. It's exciting that we have so many members who are participating today. But I'm really grateful for your work here. And I also think I see Congressman Cole, who was on as well, who recently underwent surgery. So he really is a trooper here. And thank you. For looking for a speedy recovery for you. But thank you very, very much, Congressman Aguilar. And with that, I will recognize Congressman Lamb from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for all of your hard work on this and for opening up this process for us. I'm just going to run through these very quickly because I know how many people you have waiting. But my first two community projects under Commerce, Justice, and Science both relate to police departments here in my district. The first is the Communication System Improvement Project. It's a $223,000 request. People have commented on rural broadband during this hearing. In a lot of places, the issue is actually connectivity more broadly. So it kind of incorporates bad internet and difficult cell phone service. And this is really part of that problem. We have a lot of small police agencies trying to communicate with each other, and this would really help. We also have a request for about $550,000 for body-worn cameras. Obviously, given the events of last summer and the daily struggle for transparency and accountability for law enforcement, but also the ability of law enforcement to show the actual truth of encounters, it kind of benefits both sides, and very important thing for our county. A couple of water-related projects under Interior and Environment that I just wanted to highlight. One in particular, Center Grange Road waterline replacement for a little less than $1 million. This is a great example of why these community projects are such a good idea, because I know from representing this area that this is an economic hotbed right now. We have one of the largest construction sites in the country, essentially right next to this town, and they're building a giant factory, and yet their water infrastructure is really designed for a time when it was all farmland. So that would be a hard thing to communicate to bureaucrats in Washington, but hopefully the committee can support these water projects that we need. I also just wanted to talk briefly about a couple of other important requests. We have one for the Coriopolis train station, which is kind of the center geographically of my district. Again, it would be hard to communicate on paper to a bureaucrat what this means to the community, but it's an old train station, like 100 years old, that kind of sits right in the center of the town. And volunteers with their own sweat equity have gone in and removed rubble and cobblestones, and they've unearthed all these great old historical artifacts from a time when trains were the dominant mode of transportation. And it's just really a big, grand old building. And because of all the volunteer labor that everybody in the town has put in it, they really have their hopes invested in it, and they've drawn funding from a whole lot of sources. So they really have a plan to develop this into community space, economic development projects, and this could be the key final piece. Wanted to say something lastly about the Neighborhood 91 Equipment Fund. Again, this is under transportation, housing, urban development, et cetera. Neighborhood 91 is, as far as I know, the only program like it in the country. It sits on land owned by Pittsburgh International Airport, and it intends to become an advanced manufacturing ecosystem where any startup company interested in any phase of advanced manufacturing, specifically for metals, would be able to come there, and some of the basic infrastructure would already be in place. And there are very specific gases that you need in this process. And then, of course, a 3D printer that actually prints metals is a pretty novel and expensive thing. And so we're trying to help establish this ecosystem. This is the basic model on which economic development has always worked. It's a particular part of our heritage, obviously, in Pittsburgh, the Steel City, to be working with metals. And we think that if we make the right investments today, the government, foundations, private sector working together, that decades from now, we will have jobs and entire countries or entire companies in this region that are making things, the 21st century version of the steel mills we had at the height of the 20th century. So those are just a few of our projects. We've submitted all of them. I thank you very much for your time and attention. This will mean a lot to the people of Western Pennsylvania who have never really recovered as a whole community from the collapse of the steel industry. And this is a great role that our government can play to help us get back up on our feet after a difficult year. So thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and I yield.
Thank you very, very much. And thank you for the thoughtful testimony. And I've really been so pleased to listen to members on both sides of the aisle today to talk about what are the kinds of projects that coming directly out of their communities, which provide for whether it's water or whether it provides for law enforcement or child care, et cetera. It really has been gratifying to see the level of communication people have had with their communities about what those needs are. So I thank you very, very much for your testimony this morning. And with that, if I can recognize Congressman Van Drew from New Jersey. You're recognized for 5 minutes, Congressman Van Drew.
Thank you, Chairwoman. It's a pleasure to see you and the ranking member, I'm sure. And I really thank you for providing the opportunity to testify before the House Committee on Appropriations. You know, over the past weeks, I've testified before many appropriations subcommittees to advocate for projects of great importance to my district. I hope that the committee considers each of these projects and provides as much funding as the committee is able to do. These community projects are worthwhile investments that not only benefit the whole community, but will strengthen the United States as a whole. Today, I'm here to speak about a special project, much larger in scope and of great national importance. I respectfully request that the committee provide $55 million to the United States Coast Guard to initiate phase 1 of the training center, Cape May Barracks recapitalization project through the construction and improvements accounts. This project is included, and this is important, this project is included in the Coast Guard's fiscal year 2020 budget request as the #1 project in the major shore and housing category. Training Center Cape May is the Coast Guard's sole accession point for its enlisted workforce. 80% of the Coast Guard's total workforce is absorbed through the training center in Cape May in my district. This existing barracks were constructed in the early 1960s, and they are in serious need of modernization. The proposed 4-phase project will reconstruct the entire barracks infrastructure and truly provide phenomenal benefits for the Coast Guard. The request $55 million is to execute the first phase of the project, which will demolish the oldest barracks in the facility and construct a brand new 66,000 square foot barracks. 3 benefits to the project. The project will expand the training center's throughput by 15 to 20%, which means that 15 to 20% more recruits will go through. The project will modernize classrooms with digital infrastructure, which is very much needed. The project will allow the Coast Guard to achieve its objective, and this is important too, this project will allow the Coast Guard to achieve its objective of 50-50 gender parity. The U.S. Coast Guard is expanding operations across the country and across the world, whether executing freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea or conducting research and rescue operations off the U.S. coast. The Coast Guard has a lot to do and plans on doing even more in the coming decades. The United States can build all the cutters in the world, and they are important, but you need personnel to operate those vessels. Most of the personnel come through the training center in Cape May. The proposed barracks recapitalization will increase the training center's throughput by 15 to 20% or up to an additional 1,000 service members each year. This investment ensures the Coast Guard has the workforce it needs to accomplish its mission at home and abroad. The newly constructed barracks will include classrooms equipped with digital infrastructure necessary. We need not only more coasties, we need them to be as prepared as possible to execute the Coast Guard mission. A major objective of the Coast Guard is to achieve 50-50 gender parity in the Coast Guard, 50% men, 50% women. As it stands, the training center is only able to accommodate about 30% female recruits. Again, over 80% of the Coast Guard's enlisted workforce they all enter through the training center. To meet the Coast Guard's objective of 50-50 gender parity, this project must be funded. This project is the Coast Guard's #1 housing infrastructure priority. It will provide phenomenal benefits to the Coast Guard and to the United States of America. I urge you to provide the requested funding so that our Coast Guard men and women have access to every tool possible to prepare themselves to execute the Coast Guard mission. Thank you so much for your time.
I thank my colleague for your time as well and for your interest in both on the quality of life in terms of the Coast Guard and for the workforce itself. I have a Coast Guard facility in my district, so I know very, very much about what they do and how they do it. So thank you so much for your testimony this morning. And if I can now, let me recognize Representative Buddy Carter from Georgia, and you're recognized for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate this opportunity to share my concerns and priorities for the 1st Congressional District of Georgia. It's an honor to represent a district rich in history and home to tens of thousands of active duty military personnel and veterans. I'm here today to discuss my appropriations priorities, both defense and non-defense. As home of the Atlantic Ballistic Missile Submarine Fleet at Kings Bay, I've seen the dedication of our sailors and their families firsthand. The Ohio-class submarines play a critical role in nuclear deterrence, but will soon be reaching the end of their life cycle. With growing threats around the globe, it's important to maintain the undersea leg of a nuclear triad. I fully support full funding for the Columbia-class program to ensure the timely development and deployment of our nuclear submarine fleet. Additionally, we're looking at the retirement of the SSGNs, which currently provide the largest undersea strike capability for non-nuclear launches. They will soon be replaced, leading to a gap in our non-nuclear undersea strike capabilities. The Virginia Payload Module is a cost-effective way to preserve our capacity and offset the loss of our guided missile submarines. For that reason, I'm submitting language to understand the future of the program and basing decisions. Our soldiers have always been able to depend on the close air support provided by the A-10s. And I was there last week, by the way, to see the A-10s again. What a great piece of machinery. Those are operated out of Moody Air Force Base in the 1st District. The A-10's capabilities and survivability continue to be showcased as these platforms are deployed around the world in support of our combat troops. Their role in supporting our ground forces and servicing search and rescue operations cannot be understated. I'm requesting full funding for the A-10 platform and any upgrades. Lastly, the Star Base program and the National Guard's Youth Challenge program have helped to better the lives of thousands of kids across the country. These programs help our youth pursue new opportunities in their lives and help them get their lives back on track. For that reason, I support robust funding to ensure these programs continue to benefit future generations. For non-defense, I have a number of priorities. Under the Energy and Water Committee, continued funding for the Savannah Harbor Expansion Project is a top issue for me. Once completed, it will provide over $200 million in additional economic benefits for the region and the country. As one of the most significant Corps of Engineers projects underway in the United States, it's critically important this project is funded to completion. Under the Labor, Health, and Human Services Subcommittee, I have several priorities: funding for Children's Hospital graduate medical education, the National Institutes of Health, and several research programs included in my submissions. In addition to these, requests for the CDC, ASPR's, BARDA programs, and the Strategic National Stockpile are also included. There are a number of significant critical programs that fall under the subcommittee's jurisdiction, and I urge your support for their inclusion. Finally, military construction and veterans projects are significant priorities within my district. That's why I've submitted several requests for military construction and mental health programs. With the recent release of the unfunded requirements list, I've included several requests addressing impacted installations in the 1st Congressional District of Georgia. Our installations need the funding to meet the goals and objectives associated with our warfighters. Additionally, we must take care of those who have served our nation in our military. Madam Chair, I appreciate your attention to these requests, and I thank you for the opportunity to provide input, and thank the committee for their diligent work on all of these important subjects that we are discussing here today.
Thank you for your testimony, Congressman Carter, and thank you. I will reiterate the real thoughtful process of members on both sides of the aisle in making their requests on community project funding, which addresses the very specific needs of communities, as well as national security issues, as well as what you are interested in the Children's Hospital and so forth. So it's rewarding to think that we can be able to look at these and see if we can provide some help and support on these very critical issues for your community. Thank you.
Thank you
so much. Thank you. Let me recognize now Congresswoman Sylvia Garcia from Texas.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to you and all your committee, subcommittee chairs for having us today to talk directly to you about our 2022 packet. As you know, I'm Sylvia Garcia. I just want to make sure everybody understands that I represent more than Houston. I know I'm known as a Congresswoman from Houston, but I also represent South Houston, Pasadena, Jacinto City, and Galena Park. My district is about 78% Latino and includes about 22% low-income households made up of children and seniors. All about 33% of my district is uninsured. That is why I want to flag and advocate for several of the projects that we've submitted, which directly improve the quality of life for our constituents. I submitted 10 projects across the Labor, HHS, Education Subcommittee, and the Transportation HUD Subcommittee. But for the sake of time, I'm only going to highlight a few. One is for a COVID long-haul research project offered by the prominent institution, Baylor College of Medicine. This important program will benefit my community by providing healthcare access and COVID research across a diverse patient population, including low-income and minority populations. Madam Chairwoman, you know how difficult it is sometimes to get the data. And we got to make sure that the data comes from across the sector, not just those few that can show up to the institutions to do some of this research. So this project will look at the long haulers to see the long-term effects of COVID. So we have seen the impact of healthcare inequality during this pandemic, and this is an important time to correct some of these injustices. Also related to healthcare is a request for flood mitigation structural improvements to El Centro de Corazon, which is an FQHC clinic in my district. As you can imagine, flooding and heavy rainfall are a huge problem here in Houston. It is important that this FQHC clinic get the proper structural updates to keep water out and keep their doors open to patients in the community during a disaster. I also requested funds for a local partnership, which provides physical and mental health services for the youth in one of my local high schools. The project would be a partnership between MacArthur High School, a part of the Aldine Independent School District, and the Hope Clinic, also an FQHC. This mental health clinic will be available to eligible adults as well in the community that faces inequity in healthcare resources. And as you know, Madam Chair, we've all tried to do more in the mental health arena. This is a great partnership. It's already there. This FQHC just needs some extra dollars to be able to do their outreach and work that they need to do at this high school. I also want to quickly note a couple of requests from some of my smaller cities. The following requests were sent to Transportation and HUD Subcommittee. Jacinto City requested funds to improve the city's water supply lines. This will help the local fire department deliver stronger, more reliable water supply should a fire emergency arise. I made a similar request on behalf of the city of Galena Park. Galena Park seeks assistance to improve their potable water lines in particular. The availability of potable water became a huge issue after the winter storm that hit us earlier this year. The storm busted pipes and water lines across the state, including Galena Park, causing major disruptions in water accessibility for households and cities alike. Access to drinking water is, as you know, Madam Chair, a basic human right, and this request will ensure that for my constituents. From healthcare to COVID recovery to mental health and infrastructure, granted these requests would go a long way to help some of my local communities, especially those small cities outside of the city of Houston who struggle the most. They have smaller budgets, they don't quite have the resources, and all of these cities, Madam Chair, there are probably at about 75 to 80% Latino, very Spanish speaking, and have the least access. So I strongly urge consideration. I do want to thank you for your time and thank you for putting this community projects initiative on the table. I think this is a great way for members to bring home the bacon, if you will, because that is what really we should be doing, is reflecting the needs of our communities and reflecting the priorities in the FY22 appropriations bill. So I'll be happy to answer any questions, or if you need any detail and any of the others, we've given everything to your staff. But with that, Madam Chair, thank you again, and I yield back.
Thank you very, very much for the testimony. And I think you make a very, very good point that the smaller cities, often cities that have not had the opportunity for resources in the past, and is really critical. And one of the prime movers in the community projects of funding was to be able to reach out beyond larger cities. But your issues on the long haulers, I think we know not of where that will go. The research will help us. I also think that we don't know what's going to occur with the consequences of COVID and mental health. We don't know that yet. We just know that they'll be substantial. And it's critical with regard to insurance for folks, and as well the public health issues that surround water are a national issue and not just in one location in the country. So thank you for your testimony, much appreciated, and thank you for providing the staff with the information. And with that, let me recognize Congressman Tom Suozzi from New York. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and thanks to all the members of the committee. You must have a marathon day, and I really appreciate you taking this opportunity to spend this time with us. I'm happy to testify in favor of three capital improvement projects, one of which is a normal programmatic request, I guess, and the other two are community-funded projects. First, $70 million for the United States Merchant Marine Academy. Second, $4 million for the Northwell Health Geriatric Center of Excellence. And third, $300,000 for shellfish seeding on the North Shore of Long Island. First, I serve as chairman or acting chairman of the Board of Visitors of the United States Merchant Marine Academy, which is located in my district in Kings Point, Long Island. And I'm seeking $70 million for the Academy's really long ignored and woefully inadequate infrastructure. It's really an embarrassment. Everyone agrees that the Merchant Marine Academy, one of our 5 service academies, which trains our nation's mariners and is vital to our nation's defense, has embarrassingly bad facilities. The new head of MARAD, Acting Administrator Lucinda Leslie, who I recently met with, the Department of Transportation, the National Academy of Public Administration, the Parents and Alumni Association, and the Academy leadership itself all agree that the facilities, many of which are 80 years old, are decaying, and its buildings, its electric grid, its information technology system, or lack thereof, are thwarting the institution's recruiting capabilities and its mission to properly train the next generation of our nation's mariners. Compared to the other service academies, the Merchant Marine Academy's infrastructure is woefully subpar. Decades of neglect and, probably more important, bureaucracy have left the United States Merchant Marine Academy as an orphan. And I'd like to submit for the record an 8-year infrastructure plan created by a group of experts and alumni who are so concerned, these are parents and alumni, so concerned about the Academy's declining infrastructure that they formed the United States Merchant Marine Academy Maritime Security Infrastructure Council, and they prepared this report. The Academy and the Board of Visitors are committed to restoring the United States Merchant Marine Academy to its proper place in the pantheon of service academies. However, the Academy cannot wait to get started without your help. That's why I've specifically and respectfully requested an initial investment of $70 million in infrastructure funding, $25 million, which I hope will be used for design and engineering costs, and $45 million, which I hope will be used for shovel-ready projects. The Midshipmen's Activity Center is the focus. The Academy really needs this money to move forward into the 21st century. Second, I respectfully request $4 million for the Northwell Health Geriatric Center of Excellence, my highest priority for a community funding project. Our goal is to create a national model for senior citizen healthcare. Growing up, all 4 of my grandparents lived at my home. 3 of them were very sick. My mom was an operating nurse, helped to take care of them. We all helped take care of them, quite frankly. And over the past few years, my mom and dad have passed away. They were 95 and 93. As the committee is well aware, there is a storm coming in our country. 10,000 Americans are turning 65 every day. And the number of Americans over 65 will almost double in the next 25 years. Our current health system does not properly account for the growing number of seniors and their special needs in dealing with the complexity of our healthcare system. That's why it's so important to standardize and implement best practices for elder care. The Northwell Health Geriatric Center for Excellence, located at Glen Cove Hospital, will serve as a hub of education and research, as well as advocacy for older adults that I think can be modeled throughout the nation. I'm excited about this project, not just because of the benefit it would provide to my constituents, but because it could be replicated throughout the country and become a model for geriatric centers throughout the nation. Third and finally, as you know, Madam Chairwoman, I serve as co-chair of the Long Island Sound Caucus, and I'm seeking $300,000 for my community funding project to seed the North Shore of Long Island with shellfish, oysters, and clams. This project will help restore shellfish populations and reduce, as importantly, reduce nitrogen, bacteria, and harmful algal blooms in our bays and harbors. Unsewered homes, businesses, stormwater runoff increases nitrogen loading and the potential for algae growth. When these algae blooms die off, their decomposition uses up oxygen in the water, causing hypoxia and threatening many species. Fortunately, with a large enough population, shellfish are able to help control this excess nitrogen as they are filter feeders. A single adult oyster can filter 50 gallons of seawater every day. This project aims to restore and enhance our valuable waterways under threat due to nitrogen runoff by seeding our harbors with shellfish. Water quality is critical to our local economies. And I see that I'm running out of time, so I'll just say, you know how important the Long Island Sound is. Long Island Sound's our national park for those of us that live in Connecticut and Long Island and New York, and we want to try and save it. So thanks so much, everybody. I know you have a long day, and I hope that you found some of my projects interesting.
More than interesting, and I'm so proud to co-chair the Long Island Sound, caucus with you and our Republican colleagues as well. So we're all committed to that and to a shellfish industry. It's been a lifeblood for the state of Connecticut, as I know is for New York as well. But no, thank you very, very much for the projects and law enforcement. Not law enforcement, but the Merchant Marine Academy, as well as the geriatric program. It shows the range of efforts and needs that are in our community. So thank you very much this morning for your testimony, or this afternoon now. Wow. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman.
Okay, you take care. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Congresswoman Robin Kelly from Illinois, and you are recognized for 5 minutes, Congresswoman Kelly.
Thank you, Chairwoman DeLauro and Ranking Member Granger for allowing members to share their appropriations priorities. As you know, I represent Illinois' 2nd Congressional District, which consists of urban, suburban, and rural communities. We often think of gun violence as an urban or city issue, but this issue affects people in all communities. According to the Gun Violence Archive, over 19,000 people have died from gun violence this year. 258 from mass shootings. Just this year, 10 people were killed at a supermarket in Colorado, 9 killed at a San Jose rail yard 2 weeks ago, and 4 injured by gun violence during a softball tournament in San Angelo, Texas. The Chicagoland area is also experiencing a surge in gun violence. In Chicago, 60 people were shot this past weekend. including an 11-year-old girl. Though we are hardly halfway through the year, nearly 1,500 people have been shot in Chicago so far, putting us on track to have another tragic record year of gun violence. We are battling a public health epidemic, but we are not treating it that way. Gun violence disproportionately affects people of color and is now one of the leading causes of death for children and teenagers. We must fight. We must address this far-reaching health risk of gun violence and the systemic racism that normalizes the death of young Black men and women. Each life lost to gun violence is tragic and unfortunate. Deaths are not the only impact. For every shooting, countless people are traumatized, left to grieve a loved one, angered by the event, and increasingly anxious about the safety of their communities. The mental health impacts of gun violence are both the cause and effect of this tragedy. Without addressing the generations of trauma some communities have experienced, we will not be able to pull ourselves out of this epidemic. Of course, there are also the physical and financial costs that we must address. People injured by gun violence often face challenging and expensive recoveries, including surgeries and physical therapy. Many live with disabilities for the rest of their lives. For decades, the biggest threat to the lives and safety of children and teenagers was automobile accidents. In response, we mandated the use of seatbelts and car seats and created stricter safety guidelines for automobile manufacturing. Deaths by vehicle crashes declined significantly and have remained relatively low. Today, firearms are the leading cause of death for children and teenagers, with an estimated 1,800 children and teens shot to death each year. That means 1,800 empty school desks and chairs at family dinner tables. Black children and teenagers are 14 times more likely to be killed by a gun than white children. There is no one program or solution to gun violence, but there are steps we can take now to save lives. Many communities require increased support for gun violence intervention and prevention programs, focused on interrupting cycles of violence and facilitating mentorships to individuals at high risk of engaging in gun violence. Research shows that sustained funding for evidence-based programs tailored for specific local contexts and working in partnership with the affected communities can achieve significant and long-term reductions in firearm violence. That is why I led an appropriations letter with 39 of my colleagues calling for an investment in community violence intervention programs. For the subcommittee on Commerce, Justice, and Science, we requested $100 million for the Office of Justice Programs to develop a grant program to support community-based violence intervention programs and report language for prioritizing discretionary grants for community-based violence intervention programs, and directing the Office of Victims of Crime to make Victims of Crime Act funding available for gun violence victim service programs. For the Subcommittee on Labor, Health, and Human Services and Education, we requested $100 million for the CDC to develop a public health-centered grant program to support community-based programs that prevent violence, and $10 million to establish a resource center at HHS to coordinate funding opportunities across relevant agencies, oversee research into effective programs, and provide technical assistance to local offices of violence prevention and community-based organizations. Additionally, we requested report language directing HHS to support community-based violence intervention programs through relevant grant programs, and language directing the Department of Labor to prioritize workforce innovation and opportunity funding like the Young Adult Reentry Partnership and Youth Build to support reintegration, transitional employment, long-term impactful positions, union positions, and living wages for systems involved with youth and older adults in cities disproportionately impacted by gun violence. I know I have run out of time, but you know how I feel about this topic, and I'm in my 9th year talking about it, and it's not getting any better. I mean, 60 people shot last weekend. You know, we have got to do something, Madam Chair. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very, very much for your testimony. And I want to say thank you for your leadership you have. And I know it's a long time and it's a long slog, but but you need to continue on with your leadership in this effort. And I think you said something very clear, which should be understood, which is that this is a public health emergency, and that's what we need to focus on, the public health aspects of this of this effort. And I think everyone is, and we need to look to what's happening around our nation with the increasing of the violence and so forth. So thank you so much for taking the lead, and thank you for your support of the gun violence prevention research, which we are undertaking both at the NIH and the CDC. So thank you very, very much. Thanks. I appear to be muted. I'm sorry. Let me recognize Congressman Greg Meeks from New York.
Good afternoon. And before I get started, let me just thank you, Chairwoman DeLoria, for all of the hard work that you've been doing on this great appropriation committee and holding this hearing today. And I also want to thank my friend, Barbara Lee, for being an excellent partner in our new, and we're both sharing new roles now. She chair of SFOPS and subcommittee, and I'm chair of the House Committee on Foreign Affairs. And so I'm here in that capacity today. So I'm not here to advocate for some of my local programs, but the COVID-19 pandemic has taught us that many of the most pressing challenges facing the world today are global in nature and require a global response. And so that's why, as chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, I firmly believe that foreign affairs budget must reflect that reality. So this means that we must first invest in our workforce. So following years of neglect, it is past time that we commit to building a strong civil and foreign service that not only represents this country abroad, but reflects our diversity here at home. And so thus, I applaud President Biden for more than doubling the amount of money dedicated to broadening recruitment, diversity, and inclusion programs at the State Department and his FY 2022 budget request. We should answer the president's commitment with our own action. And I'm proud that last month, the House passed the State Department authorizing legislation that addresses barriers to diversity from the entry level to senior executive service. While this is an important milestone, we must continue this work by making robust investments in programs to increase the diversity of our national security workforce, like the Gilman International Scholarship Program or the Rangel and Pickering Fellowship Programs. As the United States re-engages with the world, multilateral engagement is critical. This starts with fully funding America's commitments to the United Nations, including paying down our arrears. The UN has long served as a force multiplier for the United States, helping to protect our interests and promote democracy and peace and stability. And I urge the committee to support the $2.7 billion for the contributions for international peacekeeping activities account. The United States also has a responsibility to receive and to revive efforts to address those areas in which it has historically underinvested, to include advancing our economic ties in the continent of Africa. So I fully support the president's request for $80 million to support Prosper Africa, an initiative that aims to promote and facilitate two-way trade and investment with the continent of Africa. And I look forward to working with the administration to further develop and strengthen these efforts. I am heartened by President Biden's commitment to renew U.S. leadership in Central America through a 4-year, $4 billion infusion of funds to address the root causes of migration. This represents a long overdue recognition that we cannot thrive without secure and stable neighbors. We must also recognize that we cannot thrive, we cannot do these efforts, and they depend upon the stability of the entire region, and we have to redouble our work to support efforts like the Caribbean Basin Security Initiative, which has been critical in helping our Caribbean partners combat violence and crime. We must also make investments to strengthen health systems around the world to ensure we are better able to address future global health threats. And I hope this committee will robustly support proven programs such as the President's Malaria Initiative, which improve the lives of millions while helping partner countries develop more robust health infrastructure. And I encourage you to increase funding for the PMI to $902.5 million in fiscal year 2022. I also urge you to make a greater commitment to funding family planning and reproductive health programs, which are so important to ensuring better health outcomes and more equitable development around the world. Funding UNFPA, a critical multilateral partner in supporting maternal and child health, access to comprehensive health care, and combating child marriage is crucial to this approach. And finally, last month, I unveiled the Ensuring America Global Leadership and Engagement Act, or we call it the EAGLE Act. This bill will reinvigorate our institutions and diplomatic efforts to effectively respond to the China challenge. I hope to work hand in hand with you as we move forward with the EAGLE Act and the appropriations process and other legislation to ensure that America can rise to meet the challenge of leading and re-engaging the world. Thank you so very much. I know I'm out of time.
Thank you very, very much for your testimony, and thank you for your leadership in the making sure that the U.S. is re-engaging and taking its role as a as the leader in the world. And you mentioned several other issues that have to do with peacekeeping. I think we have much to do in the area of global health. It's really a space, I think, where we can take leadership, particularly now with regard to this pandemic, and making sure that that other countries have access to the vaccines, and so that we can make sure that it's a humanitarian issue, but it is our own national security as well. So again, thank you for taking the lead and making sure that the U.S. is a leader in the world community as we go forward. So thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Chair.
And with that, let me recognize Congressman Kahale, Hawaii.
Aloha, Chair DeLauro and members of the committee. Thank you so much for allowing me this opportunity to speak on behalf of Hawaii's 2nd Congressional District, and specifically the community-funded project requests that I've submitted. Chair, Hawaii's 2nd Congressional District, which contains all 8 of the main Hawaiian islands from Hilo to Hanalei, is a unique district in that the communities that I represent live in the most isolated population center in America. These communities are rural, they're underserved, and need additional support from the federal government to address the lack of upward mobility and the persistent gap in unemployment rates and poverty rates between urban and rural communities. My family comes from the last native Hawaiian fishing village in Hawaii called Miloli'i, and I understand firsthand how rural communities often struggle to access federal resources. Small towns and rural communities across the United States are looking for ways to strengthen their local economies, to provide a better quality of life and increase access to opportunities for their children. And they need assistance from the federal government to leverage these resources. And this is why I have focused my community-funded projects on programs that will increase economic investment and educational opportunity while still preserving the rural landscape. Rural communities have been hit hard by changing economic trends, and we must ensure that rural communities have the resources and support they need to create a new future for themselves so that they can produce high quality, sustainable jobs for the future. In Hawaii and across the country, too many native and local families are forced to move to urban centers due to the high cost of living and low job opportunities in their hometowns. And so we need to invest in programs and institutions that will continue to build and provide for future generations. My community-funded projects are focused on areas of high need. These include access to educational opportunities for our keiki, our children, diversifying our economy through agriculture, and protecting our environment. Funding of these projects would be a step in the right direction for building resilient rural communities that can invest in people. The projects I've chosen not only benefit rural communities, but are also led by local community leaders. With additional funding, we can empower these local organizations by leveraging their existing assets and knowledge to promote homegrown opportunities. For example, one of the areas I represent Puna is the fastest growing area in Hawaii, yet lacks the critical community resources like a community center in their district. Puna has the second highest poverty rate in the state. Nearly half its residents live at or below 130% of the poverty rate. This region was most heavily impacted by the Kilauea lava flow of 2018, which greatly affected this once thriving agriculture industry, creating losses of $30 million throughout the tropical fresh cut flowers and papaya industries. Two of my community funded projects would address the needs to explicit this rural area by establishing a Boys and Girls Club, which would serve as a community center, and providing funding to rebuild the local agricultural community. The establishment of a Boys and Girls Club would provide many families with basic necessities such as supplemental nutrition, childcare, youth development, and disaster relief aid. Most children living in Puna go unattended after the school day is finished. And currently there is no building facilities that can be accessed and utilized to host out-of-school kids with programming and childcare services. The dearth of childcare access in rural communities creates a unique challenge for rural working parents, which in turn eliminates job opportunities for those parents. We need to invest in rural community infrastructure to assist these communities to recover and thrive. Fortifying community-based organizations in distressed communities can help to build inclusive, vibrant communities. Community centers are critical, multifaceted establishments that can provide skills and training and further perpetuate cultural practices. And Chair, being a proud Native Hawaiian, I know how important it is to pass along our traditions and cultural values from generation to generation. And this is why I have also included funding for the Miloli'i Community Enrichment and Historical Center, a convening space where the entire community village of Miloli'i can have a gathering place for public meetings, cultural activities, and recreational programs. Finally, economic inequality between urban and rural areas has been increasing rapidly during the COVID-19 pandemic. However, while rural communities face unique challenges, they also have distinctive assets that, with the help of government infrastructure, they will be able to build capacity and thrive. The Nature Conservancy, Ma'o Organic Farms, the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement, and finally the DLNR's Conservation Resource Enforcement are all organizations that we can work with. So I thank you for your allowing me to speak today, and I ask for your support for these critical funding projects for the people of Hawaii's 2nd Congressional District. Mahalo nui, Chair. Aloha from Hawaii. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you very, very much. I think both Congressman Cole and I, want to reciprocate with mahalo to you as well. It just is, you're so eloquent. It's really wonderful. But I want to just say very, very quickly, thank you for your emphasis on rural communities, local community leaders. That is the direction that we need to try to move forward and to serve those underserved communities like Puna and others that have been without the resources to be able to move forward. So thanks so much for your testimony this morning. This afternoon, I keep forgetting it's afternoon. And with that, let me recognize Congresswoman McMorris Rogers from Washington State. Congresswoman.
Good morning from Washington State. Chairwoman,
I just might add that we had a couple of Washington State folks early. That means it was 7 o'clock in the morning. Kathy.
That's hardcore.
That's hardcore, right? So welcome.
Well, thanks for fitting me in late morning here in Spokane, Washington. Chairwoman DeLauro and Ranking Member Granger, I greatly appreciate the opportunity to testify before the committee today on some of Eastern Washington's priorities for the upcoming fiscal year. This year's community project funding process has really allowed Congress to bolster Article 1, power of the purse. And I appreciate the commitment to transparency that the committee has brought to this process. And I think it allows for Congress to do a better job in directing how hard-earned taxpayer dollars are spent, ensuring that the resources go where the need is the greatest. Based on the community project funding request that my office has received, it's clear that many areas in Eastern Washington have major water infrastructure needs. You'll see that my community project submissions include drinking water projects in Airway Heights and the town of Cusick, and wastewater projects in Stevens County, the city of College Place, and the town of Malden. As you've seen by the submission information and the letters of support, all of these projects would help meet a critical need. Today, I'd like to share more information on the challenges facing the town of Malden. You may not know, but over Labor Day last year, the Babb Road fire devastated the towns of Malden and Pine City in Eastern Washington. I visited these towns days after the fire was still being extinguished, and the devastation took my breath away. The city hall, the post office, the fire station were all gone. 85 homes and surrounding farmland had been destroyed. Miraculously, the community church up on the hill stood despite the fire damage. In the days and weeks that followed the fire, the residents of Malden and Pine City rolled up their sleeves and got to work on assessing the damage, piecing their lives back together, and focusing on long-term recovery. The level of devastation met the threshold for a federal disaster declaration, but it wasn't declared until February 2021, months after these towns had lost nearly everything. As Malden has worked to rebuild, it's become clear that a large on-site sewer system is needed to help advance the recovery efforts. Many of the residential lots in Malden are small and do not have the required space for a modern septic system. And much of the town is built on gravel soils with pine tree vegetation, which further complicates sewer system installation. A large on-site sewer system that serves the whole town is critical for Malden's recovery. It would also protect the nearby Pine Creek and all the aquatic life living in it and the riparian zone. Pine Creek flows year-round. It is a natural catchment area for winter snow and spring run runoff, so the upgraded sewer system is critical for protecting the local environment as well as the tributary waters. The Malden Sewer Project has been deemed eligible for EPA STAG grant funding under Section 601C1 of the Clean Water Act. I believe it is exactly the type of project the STAG grant program was designed to support. And as Malden Mayor Dan Harwood said in his letter of support for the project, quote, "I cannot stress how important the sewer system is to Malden's future. It's essential if the town is to rebuild, grow, and thrive." Again, I thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I appreciate your consideration on behalf of the important projects I've submitted on behalf of Best Buddies Eastern Washington, City of Airway Heights, City of College Place, City of Spokane, Spokane County, City of Cusick, the Columbia Basin Development League, Stevens County Public Utility District, and the town of Malden. And I yield back the remainder of my time.
What great advocacy. And it's been really interesting today to listen to the number of whether the drinking water, wastewater projects, sewer systems. It seems it's a crying need nationwide in these areas. And so many of our colleagues on both sides of the aisle are introducing these projects through the community project funding process. So thank you for your advocacy and participating in this effort. It really is. It means a lot. So thank you very, very much. Take care. And I appreciate it, as I know the ranking member does as well. And I see Congressman Cole there, who is my partner on Labor Age. So thank you very, very much. And with that, let me call to testimony Congresswoman Claudia Tenney from New York. Recognized for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Chairman DeLauro, and obviously Ranking Member Granger and all the distinguished members of the House Appropriations Committee for giving members the opportunity to show their priorities today. It's really important. I'm honored to represent New York's 22nd Congressional District, which stretches from the shores of Lake Ontario in the north down to the Pennsylvania border in the south. So we have all of central New York and the center of the state. This region has a strong history of innovation as the birthplace of IBM. Many don't know that. And the current location of the Air Force Research Lab's Information Directorate, one of our nation's premier centers of scientific research and development. This is what I'd like to first discuss. Number one, the Air Force Research Laboratory, known in my community as Rome Lab, is truly world-class. It conducts cutting-edge research into emerging technologies and the high-tech digital battle space, which is exactly where we are increasingly confronting our adversaries. The game-changing technologies that Rome Lab is exploring will enable our warfighters to counter countries like China and Russia that are investing heavily in 21st century tools to target our critical infrastructure and degrade our capabilities. My request today for Rome Lab includes funding for 3 vitally important lines of effort. The first is support for a quantum network computing testbed. It is a national security imperative that we lead in the development of quantum computing technologies, especially given the advances that continue to be made by many adversaries like China. The second is to support the first and only government-owned UAS traffic management system. This investment would be a revolutionary tool to counter our adversaries' use of low-cost drones to target American lives, exploit our airspace, and commit acts that disrupt our economy and homeland security. And finally, the third is for an artificial intelligence and machine learning experimentation and transition testbed. This investment will provide the Department of Defense and other federal agencies with an operationally relevant environment for warfighters to use and assess the new AI tools, AI agents, and human-machine teaming techniques. These 3 investments are relatively small compared to the size of the total defense budget, but their impact will be tremendous. They will deepen the military's expertise in the fields that matter most in shaping the battle space of the future, such as quantum computing and artificial intelligence. The fact is, in our increasingly digital world, greater investments in these priorities are not only needly and timely, they are absolutely essential. The men and women of the Air Force Research Lab Information Directorate are unsung heroes, and I hope they can count on your support. I urge this committee to fully support these requests. The second that I would like to highlight today is for increased funding in the amount of $4.3 million for the Civil Air Patrol. I led a bipartisan effort this year with my colleague Mike Thompson to support this request. We now have more than 80 members of Congress joining us, and this is more than ever before in the previous year. Many people do not know that the Civil Air Patrol plays an integral role in supporting critical defense training and homeland security operations across the country. It is both an Air Force auxiliary and a nonprofit that serves thousands of communities in every one of our states. They are particularly important during the pandemic. It also maintains a youth cadet program focused on cultivating the next generation of leaders. This weekend, I had the honor of participating in the Civil Air Patrol training session with young cadets and auxiliary members. I can personally attest to the Civil Air Patrol's professionalism, world-class training, and commitment to serving our communities. Increased funding for the organizations will allow the program to further expand its role as the auxiliary and total force partner of the Air Force. It also will allow it to increase its support for states and communities. This is an example of all kind of smart, prudent federal spending that benefits all of us. Finally, just one more time, I'd like to reiterate my support for each of the community funding projects I supported this cycle. While I have had an opportunity to testify before several of the subcommittees in support of these projects, I wanted to specifically focus on the water infrastructure projects I submitted. This includes submissions for the Village of Marathon River Crossing, Eastern Mohawk Valley Regional Transmission Main, Vernon Water Center District, and the Village of Frankfort Water System. Some of these areas in my community are suffering from contamination of their water sources, while others have just such old infrastructure that the life cycle is at a critical risk failure. Without important federal investments, these communities risk eventually losing access to dependable supply of clean drinking water. Transparency and accountability were 2 critical factors that drove my support of these water projects. I'm committed to ensuring any federal funding brought back to our community is spent responsibly. As with any federal program, community project funds must adhere to the highest standards, and I will hold our community beneficiaries accountable. And I thank the chairwoman, and also our ranker for allowing these community projects. And I reiterate the great comments of my colleague, Kathy McMorris Rogers, on bringing Article 1 powers back to the House and our power of the purse. So I really greatly appreciate your consideration of all these requests, and thank you again for the opportunity to testify today. Really am grateful. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you very, very much, and thanks for taking a lead on defense issues and national security as it relates to technology and the research laboratory. They certainly distinguish themselves all of the time in the cutting edge research that they do. And I think critically now with regard to your word, our adversaries in this area. And again, I think overall of just listening to folks this morning is the whole issue of the water quality, water projects, et cetera, and what a national imperative that is. So I thank you very, very much for your testimony today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And with that, let me recognize Congresswoman Mary Gay Scanlon from Pennsylvania. You are recognized for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Madam Chair, thank you for allowing me to testify today. And I'm going to follow our colleague from Hawaii's example. I guess I should start by saying yo from Philadelphia. I do want to briefly discuss some of the ways we hope the appropriations bills can help the people I'm proud to represent in Pennsylvania's 5th District, which includes Delaware County and important parts of Philadelphia and Montgomery counties, and how those things can also help all of our constituents. As someone who's worked with legal services and high quality pro bono programs for decades, I've seen firsthand the impact that access to legal assistance can have for our most vulnerable constituents and neighbors. But we don't have to rely upon my anecdotal evidence. In recent years, we've seen a growing number of studies demonstrating that investment in legal services provides a robust return on investment. For example, when we fund lawyers to defend tenants in eviction matters, which are often wrongful, the return is 11 to 1. So as co-chair of the House Access to Legal Aid Caucus, I'm proud to work with leaders like Congressman Cohen and Fitzpatrick to advocate for robust funding for the Legal Services Corporation and other legal services efforts. The reality is that many of our most ambitious government programs are inaccessible to everyday Americans without the assistance of legal professionals to provide support. While our legal and benefit systems have grown increasingly complex, we continue to fund, or rather underfund, legal services at 1970s levels. The programs funded by the Appropriations Committee are more effective and efficient when they include legal aid as a key component to assist vulnerable individuals in accessing resources. Initiatives aimed at increasing opportunities for education, employment, healthcare, public service, public safety, and veteran services, preventing homelessness and protecting civil rights are critical, but they can have complicated administrative hurdles. So legal aid professionals can help people navigate the complex applications, appeal decisions, and ensure that individuals receive the maximum benefits to which they are entitled under our laws. Providing representation also makes our courts more efficient, as it streamlines and focuses the issues brought to court. Accordingly, I respectfully urge this committee to ensure robust funding for the Legal Services Corporation and other legal aid programs that protect our most vulnerable constituents. I also urge the committee to provide funding for programs that are both critical to our nation's infrastructure and create good paying union jobs. In my district, we have a manufacturing center with highly skilled employees who work on the vital CH-47F Block 2 program, which will provide critical upgrades to the Army's fleet of Chinook helicopters. This is the Army's primary heavy lift helicopter, and the Block 2 upgrades will deliver advanced heavy lift capabilities now and for decades to come. I hope the Defense Appropriations Bill will reflect how critical this program is to our national security. We've also been proud to revitalize the historic Philadelphia shipyard with $1 billion investment from the U.S. Maritime Administration, which contracted with the Philadelphia shipyard to build new training vessels as part of the National Security Multi-Mission Vessel Program. This important program helps to sustain world-class U.S. maritime training operations at the state maritime academies by equipping young American mariners with the most modern and adaptable training platforms. It will also support almost 2,000 good-paying jobs for the Philadelphia region. We also urge you to increase funding for SNAP, WIC, and summer child feeding programs, especially those programs directed at the highest need areas. In Philadelphia, the poorest large city in the country, we have an epidemic of hunger, particularly for children. It's estimated at least 21% of Philadelphia residents do not have enough food to lead a healthy life. It's a national crisis, but it's a preventable one. SNAP and WIC have shown that when fully funded, they can dramatically reduce hunger in America. The pandemic has exposed gaps in those programs. Expanding them will allow my constituents and all of our constituents in need to access food and have the ability to grow. And finally, we thank you for consideration of the community project funding requests. Simply the process of selecting them was very helpful to my office. The projects, we had over 60 projects apply. They were all excellent, strongly vetted, great community support. They addressed a range of social, equity, and economic issues, and we're really excited to continue working with the government and nonprofit agencies that submitted those projects, whether they're funded through the appropriations process or not. I'm not going to rehash them all, but we are very, very excited for this opportunity and very excited about all the recommendations that we submitted. So thank you for the chance to be here today and talk with you about my region's priorities. And as always, my staff and I are available for follow-up questions.
Thank you very, very much. And I just wanted to make a comment on, first of all, thank you for your comments on the community projects funding process, which is I heard from both sides of the aisle that the engagement of members and their communities and the and the support from communities has really been really very, very gratifying. Your emphasis on legal services, I want to just make a quick comment that helping people to navigate the system, protecting the most vulnerable people, the most vulnerable is really, really laudable. And finally, the United States is, I said this earlier to Jim McGovern, this is a nation of great abundance in terms of food, and no one in this country should go to bed hungry at night. So thank you very, very much for your testimony. Appreciate it very much. Thank you. And with that, I'm going to give Dr. Ruiz really, if you will, the final words. Dr. Ruiz, Congressman Ruiz from California, is the last member. We've had 35 members testify today, and I believe everyone has shown up. So really feel very gratified in terms of this member day. So Dr. Ruiz, the floor is yours. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair DeLauro. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before the House Appropriations Committee on Members Day. I'm here as chairman of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus to discuss critical matters of importance to the Hispanic communities, such as reducing health disparities, supporting families and children, protecting the health, safety, and welfare of workers, and improving our immigration system. We are working closely with our CAC appropriators, Representative Lucille Roybal Allard, Henry Cuellar, Pete Aguilar, Norma Torres, and Adriano Espaillat to advance our caucus's priorities. We followed a strong methodology in collaboration with CHC members, Appropriation Subcommittee staff, and many stakeholders such as Unidos US, the National Association of Latino Elected and Appointed Officials, and the National Immigration Law Center, amongst others. Well, we compiled several priorities under each subcommittee, many of which have a CHC member sponsor. Today, I am here to address specific priorities that the CHC supports as a collective. To the Subcommittee on Labor, Health, and Human Services, Education, and related agencies, the caucus asks for the Department of Labor's wage and hours divisions to be funded at $298 million to help safeguard the health and welfare of workers, including migrant and seasonal agricultural workers. The Advisory Committee on Minority Health account to include report language addressing the physician shortage crisis, which is especially pronounced in underserved communities. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention account to include report language to conduct vaccine outreach with community health workers like promotoras and have coronavirus vaccines available in immigrant detention facilities across the nation. And lastly, the Office of Refugee Resettlement account to include report language to create a humanitarian civilian response team of medical providers and child care professionals that can be deployed to help with high surges of unaccompanied children. To the Subcommittee on Legislative Branch, the caucus asks for the House of Representatives Office of Diversity and Inclusion to be funded at $3 million and include report language to allow DACA holders to receive payment for work in Congress. To the Subcommittee on Agriculture, Rural Development, Food and Drug Administration and related agencies, the caucus asks for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program to be funded at $6.6 billion. To the Subcommittee on Commerce, Justice, Science, and related agencies, the caucus asks for the Emergency Benefit Broadband Program to be funded at $24 billion, the Pro Bono Legal Representation During Removal Proceeding Program to be funded at $200 million, the Office of Legal Access Programs under the Office of Policy to be funded at $50 million, and the Hispanic Serving Institutions Undergraduate Program under the National Science Foundation to be funded at $55 million. For the Subcommittee on Transportation and Housing and Urban Development and related agency, the caucus asks for the Public and Indian Housing Account to include report language to encourage the Department of Housing and Urban Development to improve the administration of aid for natural disaster relief efforts in Puerto Rico. To the Subcommittee on Homeland Security, the caucus asks for the U.S. Immigration Custom Enforcement Account to include report language to authorize a spectrum of alternatives to detention. The U.S. Customs and Border Protection Account to include report language to establish standards of health, nutrition, shelter, water, and hygiene for immigrants detained in CBP custody, and the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services Account to include report language to restrict funds that may be used to administer an immigration and naturalization benefits program that eliminates any category of eligibility for fee waivers. We sincerely appreciate your consideration to this important caucus priorities. While we submitted more requests, we will include them in the statement for the record, given the time constraints. I appreciate you, and I thank you for this consideration.
Thank you very, very much for your testimony. And I know that it is from the Hispanic caucus, but also your own personal values and views on these issues, and the emphasis that you place on what is happening with the vaccines and the outreach there, and the what is happening at the border, and also looking at where we go with the Department of Labor. So I thank you very, very much for all of these areas, and I know we will take a look at, and so many of these are part of the overall appropriations process as well. So thank you very, very much for your leadership and the values that leadership represents. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
And I would just say, you are a trooper. You're the last member on the list for testimony, but you know, it was wonderful to hear from you. So many, many, many thanks. I'll take this opportunity to say thank you to all of my colleagues today who have participated. And I want to ask if Congressman Cole has any comments that he wants to make. It has been very, very informative to hear all of the interests, and what is quite extraordinary is, if anybody's had the opportunity to listen as we have today, is that there's so many of the same issues on both sides of the aisle and that we share in trying to and to move forward. So I want to just say a thank you again to all of my colleagues, and ask Congressman Cole if he would like to say a few words in closing.
Just very quickly, Madam Chair. First of all, you're the trooper. Thank you for putting this on and being with us for so much of the hearing. And I really want to thank all the members that showed up on both sides of the aisles. I thought we had an extraordinary range of impressive requests, both programmatic and individual and specific, you know, some of them district oriented. But I hope the people that are critical of community investments listened and really saw the merit of the various proposals that were put in front of us. We know we can't fund every worthy idea that we see, but these are worthy ideas. I mean, I listened for quite some time. I missed the initial part of the meeting, but I certainly didn't hear anything that I would be embarrassed to have my name associated with. And I think the members that brought these requests, they do so at some risk because people are critical of the process. But I think it's a reminder of how important this process is. We're all sent here to advocate for our constituents. We're all sent here to advocate for things that we think are appropriate federal expenditures. And I think seeing the range of them instead of hearing, cheap shots and terms, just to listen to project after project after project and the obvious intensity of the advocates and their knowledge. I mean, who's really against spending more money on our maritime academy? Who's really against trying to make sure that we have adequate food protection and things of that nature for all of our citizens? So again, I thought the range of programs were impressive. I thank you for doing this. I thank you for undertaking the leadership of moving us back toward this, where I think we did surrender power that appropriately belongs with Congress. I'm proud to see Congress reclaiming it, and I'm proud that our colleagues are presenting us the kind of proposals with the thoughtfulness that will command the respect of people that were worried about the process. As you and I know, we're not spending more money here. We're going to live within whatever our top lines are. What we are doing is trying to allow members who know something on ground about the needs of their constituents and constituencies to have an opportunity to bring that in front of our committee and get the appropriate consideration. That's what they're elected to do. That's what we're elected to do and appointed to do in this committee. So I commend you for your effort to bring us back, and frankly for putting on display for anybody who's critical of this process to see how it really works. Members come, make an advocate, submit appropriate documents. Our staffs go through and work those. Our members deliberate over them. They're agonizing. Not every project will be funded, and frankly, not every worthy project will be funded. But it's a pretty impressive display of how worthy these projects are, how much thought has gone into them, and how serious our committee is about discharging this very important function in an appropriate way under your leadership. So thank you very much, and I look forward to working with you as we continue down the road and look at all these projects and try to do the best we can for the American people. With that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Well, thank you very, very much, and please, good recovery here. So just, in Italian, we have the expression piano, piano. So slowly here. So, and I also want to take a moment to say another thank you to Congressman Pete Aguilar for filling in for a good portion of this as well. And once again, thank everyone for participating. And with that, this hearing is adjourned. Thank you.